Coming up next, The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy. Every Thursday from 4 p.m, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
Good afternoon and welcome to The Crunch on Reality Check Radio. I'm your host, Cam Slater, and this is the place we crunch the political issues and cut through the politician's spin. Today's show is a ripper. I'm going to speak to Gareth, the man behind the ex-troll account Knob Oddie, who received a visit from armed police to have a wee chat about his social media posts and threatened him with loss of his firearms license. Then we'll have Hugh Devereux-Mack back on the show, the spokesperson for the Council of Licensed Firearms Owners, and he's going to discuss this event and also the outrageous outburst from Chris Cahill, the Police Association boss, against Nicole McKee. And of course, it's time for a new Olivia's View with Olivia Pearson. Naturally, we'll hear from Cam's buddies and see what they have to say about the police visiting people and having a wee chat about mean tweets. And of course, we'll have the whale bag to get your feedback too. Don't forget to send comments to inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057. Today, I want to talk about an issue that should concern every freedom-loving New Zealander: the overreach of our police in policing what we say on social media. Yes, you heard that right. It's not just Big Brother watching you anymore. It's our very own police force. Now, the Free Speech Union has recently raised the alarm on a disturbing trend. They've called on the police to halt the newly introduced hate crime and hate speech training for officers. Jonathan Ayling, the chief executive of the Free Speech Union, has highlighted that this training shows a blatant disregard for our foundational human right to free speech. But let's take a step back and understand where this all started. Following the recommendations from the Royal Commission of Inquiry into the Christchurch mosque attack, the police decided to implement this new training. Now, let me be clear here. Speech that incites violence is already illegal in New Zealand, and rightly so. But here's where things go off the rails. The training for officers includes examples of so-called hate speech that are simply expressions of personal opinions. Statements like, "there are only two genders," or a billboard that reads, "Kiwi, not iwi," are cited as examples of hate speech. These are entirely legitimate opinions that Kiwis have every right to express. Our police officers should be focused on protecting our rights, not speculating on whether an opinion is hateful. And this kind of training primes officers to overzealously police our speech, leading to wrongful arrests and a chilling effect on free expression. Now, the Free Speech Union is already pursuing 8 cases in the courts or tribunals for abuses of speech rights, and 3 of these involve wrongful arrests by police. Now, what will happen if this training continues unchecked? And now let's talk about the implications for gun owners. We have seen disturbing reports of gun owners being threatened with nighttime visits from police simply for comments made on social media. Now, we'll be talking to one of those people today. This is not just an overreach, it's a direct threat to our privacy and our rights as citizens. Our homes are supposed to be our sanctuaries, not places where we live in fear of midnight knocks because we dared to express an opinion online. Hate crimes don't even exist in New Zealand law right now, and based on experiences from parts of the United Kingdom, it would be very foolish for us to go down that path. And while hate speech laws do exist, the bar for arrest or prosecution under those laws is exceedingly high. But free speech itself is an anti-extremism tool. When we prohibit individuals from expressing hateful opinions, we don't address the potential harm of their views. It's better to expose and challenge those views with counter speech and the disinfectant of sunlight. The Free Speech Union has labelled this training as potentially illegal and is taking action. They're meeting with the police commissioner to address these concerns, and if significant changes aren't made, they're prepared to take further steps. Folks, this is about more than just a few controversial opinions. It's about our fundamental rights. It's about ensuring that we can speak our minds without fear of police knocking on our doors in the dead of night. We must stand up to this overreach and defend our freedoms. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and most importantly, stay vocal. This is our country, and we have the right to express our views without fear of retribution. Thank you for listening, and we'll be right back after this break.
Thanks for tuning in to RCR, Reality Check Radio. If you like what you're listening to, or even if you don't agree with what you're hearing, you can get in touch with us by texting us your message at 2057. That's 2057. Or if you'd rather email us, you can at inbox@realitycheck.radio. We'd love to hear from you, so get in touch with us now.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
We've all been watching how the police have been arresting people in the UK for the high crimes of saying rude or intemperate things on social media. And we've been sitting watching and wondering how on earth this can happen. And yet exactly the same menacing behaviour from police is happening right here in New Zealand. Our next guest is one of those who has had a visit from the police over comments on X. Used to be called Twitter, but it's called X now. So let's see what he has to say now. With me now is Gareth, who is the owner, for want of a better term, of the X account, Knob Oddie. Welcome, Gareth.
Yeah, g'day, Cam. And that is the former X account, Knob Oddie. That the account is deleted.
It's a bit of a shame that it's deleted because you had a bit of an incident where you had some of the constabulary tip up at your house at night. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, well, actually, it was Thursday night at 6:30 p.m. We had a knock on the door, and there was two uniformed officers there. I didn't really want to engage with them. I wasn't really keen on even opening the door. But my wife opened the door, and I was standing right next to her. And they said, "Are you Gareth?" I said, "Yes." And they said, "Can I come in?" And I said, "No, thank you." And then from that point, I recorded the entire conversation.
And, were they armed? Did they appear to be armed to you?
Well, I saw that they both had tasers on their chest. I didn't look too closely if they had any further weapons.
Yeah, but you were in shock.
Definitely in shock. I mean, the last time I had two uniformed officers turn up to my door, they took me away in handcuffs for a crime I didn't commit. So I don't really have the highest faith in police. No.
And what did they want to have a chat with you about? I mean, I've seen the video.
Well,
let's just talk about it for the listeners who might not have seen the video on Simon Anderson's Twitter account or X account.
Yes, well, as you can, if you've seen the video, see, they're not very forthcoming with why they're at the door and why they've knocked. I mean, I've always been of the impression that if I ever knocked on a door that I'd have to explain my presence to whoever answered it.
Yeah.
But these police officers didn't appear to want to follow that, common courtesy, I'd call it. And they wanted me to ask them why they were at the door, and they kept on trying to engage with me. Initially, they said, if I can't come in, can I email you instead? I said, no, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And they were looking around sheepishly, seeing that they're recorded. And then the female officer said, well, how about I leave my details? And I said, well, no, thank you. Just giving them plenty of opportunity to explain why they're there.
Yeah.
And that wasn't forthcoming. They started saying, oh, this is really awkward. Surely you must have some questions about why the police have knocked on your door at night. I said, well, no, thank you.
Normally it goes the other way. They're usually telling you
You'd
we
think
ask
so.
questions and you give the answers.
Yeah, I thought it was rather strange. It really threw me for six, mate. I thought, something dodgy is going on here. Like they're not forthcoming. They're not explaining themselves. So your mind just races, right? I've got like kids in my house, I've got my wife here. What are they doing at my door? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Anybody would feel the same way. What the hell are they doing here? And it sounds very suspicious.
incredibly suspicious for me. But in the end, when I didn't want to engage, the female officer was saying, "Look, we're just trying to get your side of the story. We're trying to do you a favour before, it was basically, if you're not talking to me, there's consequences." That's what her message was.
An implied threat.
Definitely an implied threat. But not only that, is my wife was at the door, right?
Yeah.
And she just wants to know why the police are there. Yeah, she's very concerned. Me personally, I follow, the likes of Simon Anderson and others who deal with the police constantly, and I wasn't so worried about why they were there. I knew if they had evidence or a warrant, there would be no conversation. It would be straight in the handcuffs, straight in the car, and off you go. So I wasn't too concerned that I was in trouble, so I wasn't too concerned about why they were there. But I knew that if I came back into the house without that information, my wife would be very concerned and I wouldn't be having a very peaceful time. So I did ask them, I said, "Can you please explain why you were turned up at my front door without a warrant to talk to me?" And that's on the video. And she walks over like she's my friend. "Oh, 100%, I can explain, 100%. Someone has just notified the Firearms Safety Authority of some comments you've been making on social media." And I said, "Hold on, I've got an anonymous account on social media that posts jokes, and it's basically a troll account, inflammatory, getting a rise out of people, but also funny."
You've had a go at me.
Well, I definitely have, Cam, and I think you deserved it, but you definitely gave it back as good as you got anyway, mate.
Exactly. It's just a few stroppy words on X, who cares?
Exactly, mate. We've all got bigger things in our lives than a couple of stroppy words on X.
So what you've got now is the police turning up at your house while you're having dinner with the family, interrupting that, being cagey about why they're there, and then finally admitting that it's because of some intemperate or rude posts on X, and the Firearms Safety Authority is involved. This all sounds rather ominous.
Yes. It does sound ominous, and they did not make it clear at the time that nothing was done illegal or, they weren't investigating a crime. They made it seem quite serious that I had done something serious. It was only after I'm like, hold on, like, have I done something illegal? And they're like, no, you haven't done anything illegal. And it's like, well, hold on, how are you even investigating then? How did you get the information from an anonymous account, track it down to my house if no laws have been broken?
Well, it raises a question as where they got that information from and whether or not they had a valid warrant to get that information. If it's an anonymous account, the only way they could have tracked you down is to have asked for the mobile phone that was associated with that account, and then to have gone to your phone provider or whoever had the account for that phone. And it could, I guess it could be anything with number portability, and then obtain information from them. So from how I understand police work, you just can't go on a fishing expedition. They need to have some sort of warrantable information that is available that then allows them to come to your house. But again, if this is a safety issue, if this is, a person at risk because there's firearms in the house or something like that, I wouldn't be coming in and having a nice friendly chat. You have the grinning Cheshire cat partner who's, several steps back, butting in the video and going, "Oh, look, come on, mate, you could just tell us your side of the story." Well, they haven't told the other side of the story. So what the hell?
No, there was no. Yeah, there was no actual. I don't know what tweet this is about, or if it was multiple tweets, or I still don't know what it's about, right? And which makes it very hard for other people to defend me, right? Because I've seen the comments as well under the videos on YouTube and things, and people are saying, "Well, what did he say?" Well, how can I answer? I don't know what I said. And it does make people cagey to defend someone's speech if they don't know what was said. But all I know is that the cops said it wasn't illegal and they're not investigating a crime. And if I knew that about anyone's statement, I would support their statement. I'm a big free speech supporter. And there's lots of things that people say they disagree with.
As a radio,
I still support them to say it.
Yeah, exactly. As a radio host, I've got to assess whether or not, you've said anything like you're going to kill immigrants or anything, or someone should go on suicide or any. You haven't posted anything like that I've ever
No.
experienced. I mean, you chip away at people's statements and you might call them stupid or that was ridiculous or whatever, but there's nothing that's
Yes.
a harm sort of a thing that would warrant the police coming around and doorstepping you at dinner time.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not my personality, mate. I'm not a threats or, type of guy. I do like to have arguments, and even if they are quite contentious ones. My personal philosophy, I mean, you're aware of Jordan Peterson's Kathy Newman interview where he says, in order to be able to think, you must risk being offensive, right? I've always risked being offensive in pursuit of the truth. That is my style.
Yeah, I'm on the same.
And I don't doubt that I've posted many, many offensive things. Some of them even offensive to myself. But I do believe I've acted fully within the law at all times. And it's just, if you've thought about a topic and you haven't offended yourself, you just haven't thought about the topic deeply enough. That's my belief.
Mm. Well, it's an interesting take on things, and it's kind of how I operate and what I've been doing for the last 20 years. Put a controversial position out there and then fight your corner.
Even if you don't believe in it, though, you can still fight the argument to get to the truth.
That's right. And so what we've got here is, I mean, what I was stunned with is this policewoman saying, well, you realise that you've got a firearms license, which is an implied threat. We're here on your doorstep because you've got a firearms license, and you've said some mean things or some things on X. And have you considered the regulations regarding your obligations as a fit and proper person, which is a second threat?
Yes, exactly. And
all of that is actually illegal because the Arms Act doesn't define what a fit and proper person is. It doesn't define what your obligations are as a fit and proper person other than follow the law. And if you're only putting things on Twitter that's your personal opinion, which is protected by the Bill of Rights Act, not breaking any law. You're voicing an opinion, and it might not be one that's accepted by too many people or any people at all, but it's your opinion, and you're putting it out there. And these guys are coming around and knocking on your door and saying, we don't like your opinions and we're going to hold it against you for your firearms license, because that linking those two things together, that's what it looks like to me. Is that how you felt? Oh,
definitely. Definitely that's how I felt. Like it was definitely an implied threat, and that's pretty much why I deleted the account. I mean, my wife was pretty scared. I was pretty scared. And I was like, mate, I can't have this ever happen again. So I'm just going to be quiet from now on. I'm not going to post anything online. I've got my family to think about, and we can't have the police doorstepping me every time they think I've got a naughty tweet.
But that's what's called the chilling effect. That's called censorship.
Yeah, but what do you want me to do about it? I mean, I'm just a one regular Kiwi battler, Cam. I can't take on the whole bloody government.
No, you can't. But, in my view, watching the interaction with the police, you handled everything really well. You asked them what they were here for. You asked them if you were under arrest or being detained. The answers were negative in every respect. The police actually had no business being there, given that they answered in the negative for all of those questions that you raised. And so it is a chilling effect, and you've kind of done the right thing by speaking out and videoing it and putting it out on the internet to show people what is going on in our policing. I mean, the Free Speech Union has raised just in the last week the fact that police have got this hate speech training for their officers, and this seems very much to decide that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I did hear, I think it was Mark Mitchell saying that there's no such thing as a hate hub or something last week, like at pretty much the same time that Simon Anderson was releasing this clip. So, I think, I don't know if the media is being deliberately obtuse here, but if you ask Mark Mitchell if there's a hate hub, of course you're going to say no, because it's not called the hate hub, right? We have to ask him, are the police investigating non-crime hate incidents? That's what they're referred to, where they are being enforced in Scotland and England and Wales. They're called non-crime hate incidents. And that's why the police attended here. So it's clearly, I mean, the Firearms Safety Authority can get police to attend a non-crime. And, you know, if my site loses a $70,000 elevated work platform, I can't even get the police to turn up. You know, it is basically a two-tier system where the government can investigate you for non-crimes, but if you report a crime, you've got no hope. You've got no hope for help.
Well, we've all been watching things going on in the UK where grannies are being arrested for something that they said on Twitter about, you know, violent immigrants protesting, and all of a sudden they're banged up in prison. Are we heading? Do you think we're heading for that in New Zealand? Because, you know,
definitely, and you could tell because of this firearms registry has created some sort of hate hub in the vernacular we call it, right? Because clearly you can report non-crimes to them and they'll investigate. So there's only a matter of time before the state's going to expand that. Clearly, I mean, you wouldn't just have that and not expand. Everything the state does, it expands. And I'd say within a few years, I mean, in England, they didn't start arresting people on Twitter. They started with coming around and checking on your thinking. And then within a few years, it was arrest. So I'd say one follows the other.
Yeah, and that's what you've had here. They've come around to get your side of the story.
Yes.
How long is it going to be before they arrest you first to get your side of the story?
Uh-huh. It has been chilling, mate. It's been very chilling. It's affected me quite badly, you know. I'm struggling to sleep because it's like, what are they doing in the background? Like, you know, are the police investigating me still secretly? You know, it's pretty chilling.
And as a result, your voice has been lost from X, and, you know, there might be some people out there who would say, you know, the same thing about me, or that's a good thing that you've gone from X. But any time a voice is not a good time, you know, and that's the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
It's looking like your voice has been silenced by two police officers intimidating you on your doorstep.
Yeah, and let's just clarify. I mean, this isn't a massive X account. I mean, I was following 1,500 people. I might have 1,200 followers. It's not like it's got a massive reach. It's, you know, it's not like it's a threat to national security or something. You know, it's one person's opinion that might get seen a few hundred times by my followers. It didn't seem.
Makes me wonder though, were there no burglaries to attend to, or domestic violence incidents, or drunk people at the pub, or, you know, any multitude of crimes that are out there? You know, they've said to you, you're not under investigation, except yet they are. They've said to you, they're not. There's no crime. You're not being arrested. You're not being detained. Well, why were they there then? Does the policing manual allow for two constables to attend somebody's house for mean tweets? Because that's what it looks like.
Well, I don't know if the policing manual allows it, but Costa and Mark Mitchell definitely allow it. They'll take no actions against this, and they'll give you empty platitudes if you ever ask them.
Well, you know, Mark Mitchell, of course, is a former police officer, so he's part of the team. Doesn't matter that he's a former police officer. So once they're in the blue family, they stay in the blue family. Yes,
it does seem to be a bit of a club, right?
Now, I'll take this up directly with Mark Mitchell, but it is concerning that, you know, seemingly, I mean, I've been a victim of a similar thing where somebody contacted the police and, you know, falsely claimed that there was a family harm incident that could be underway at my house. I get two armed police officers turn up at my house, and you're right, it is disconcerting. I mean, that's the reason why I got hold of you, because I know exactly what you've been through. And it seems that
I would have
people out there that will use these systems, in this case, the Firearms Safety Authority, to then get some police to give you a visit. It almost seems personal.
Potentially it could be personal. I didn't know anyone I was following personally. I never met anyone I'd talked to online face-to-face. And it'd be very few people who'd be able to recognise me from my blacked-out photos in the profile. You know, I had my face completely blacked out, and anyone's face is blacked out in any sort of images that were on there. You'd really have to know me quite well to pick it from that. So I'm leaning more towards it was a police investigation that led there. But firstly, Cam, just when you led into there about contacting me, I want to say thank you very much for contacting me and the little bits of advice you have given me. That was a great help in me and my family proceeding through the situation as it happened to us.
It's not pleasant. And if you've got, this is the thing, the reason why I take up this case and talking to you and going to be talking to Colfo about this is that I have a view that if you've got a voice and you've got an ability to make an argument or a point about something, in this case, overreach of the police, that you almost have an obligation to say that as loud as you can, in this case on a radio show, and on my website, that the police don't do this to other people.
Look, I'm more than happy to say this on any conventional media. I'm never again going to post my opinion on social media. I cannot put up with the police coming around to my house to harass me. And I'm happy enough to... I'll go on with Mark Mitchell and ask him directly, mate, what the hell are you guys doing coming to my house when no crime's been committed to terrify my family? Yeah? But I'm happy enough to do that directly. What I won't ever do again, thanks to the actions of the New Zealand Police, is post my opinion online.
Well, that's a breach of the Human Rights Act. That's a breach of the Bill of Rights. They have silenced you. They've taken your voice away through fear and intimidation, which means that a lot of listeners on radio will be sitting here thinking, well, we know what that looks like because we were down there in Wellington getting bashed by the police for simply standing up to the government. And here you are being silenced for daring to have intemperate, let's use those words, intemperate views on a social media platform.
Yeah. But even if it is a breach of the human rights and Bill of Rights and all that, there's nothing an individual can do against the state. Well, at least in my case, mate. Maybe if we've got a big following like you, you've worked hard to get the following you've got, so you might have a bit more sway, more eyes on you. It's just me, mate. It's just me and my family, and
it's not just,
I've got enough on my plate.
Yeah, but Gareth, it's not just you and your family, right? There's a whole lot of people that are listening to this show right now who will feel exactly the same way and will, support you in standing up to the police in this manner. It's hard. I know I've done it, but what I've found in dealing with the police is that if you make a huge ruckus and make things hard for them and embarrassing, they tend to leave you alone. And there's far too many people in New Zealand who think because the police say something that they've got a right to say that, or they've got the law behind them to say that, and then comply. And what I've found interaction with the police is that they'll break the law in order to catch you. Yes,
that's I fully agree with that, but I'm not sure it's exactly how you put it. I'd say it's more a fear, and it's probably a valid fear that you can have of the state and the police because of the massive power imbalance, right? Like, it's not an irrational fear.
Well, it is a fear. I mean, I know what it's like to have two armed police officers, even if it's just tasers. I mean, nobody wants to be shot with one of those. Turn up to your house unannounced to talk about something that they can't even elucidate. And, here we are over a week later and you still are no better informed from the police visiting. So it can't have been that important, right? Can't have been that important because otherwise you'd know about it. Surely, right? I mean, I can't see how, if it was important enough last Thursday, that this Thursday, we still don't know why they were here. Yeah. And therefore it can't be that important, in which case, why did they visit? In which case, what operational concerns were there? I mean, if you wanted to dig into it, or you probably don't, it's a fight that you don't want to have, and it'll cost you money and time and effort and loss of sleep and all those sorts of things. But they're questions that are in mind. What is the actual issue here that was more important than dealing with the bashing of a granny down the road? Exactly. I mean, it can't have been that important, right? No. So, yeah. But as I say, mate, I mean, I know there are Kiwis out there who are very, who would support me in this, and I see their comments under the videos.
I do appreciate that reaction because, they can tell that, like, hey, we're not happy to be in the situation. We're quite intimidated, and the police just won't tell us why they're there, and they just continue to engage in a conversation unwantedly instead of just stating, hey, we are here because you said naughty words, and then I can just close the door, right? I know why they're there. Sorry, mate. Bang. Yeah. Until they tell me that, I've got to stand there and engage with them as to why they are there.
Which is what they want, and it's my view that the police engage in these sorts of things to catch you out, in which case the best policy is the policy you enacted. Say as little as possible, ask direct questions. Am I being detained? Am I under arrest?
Yeah.
Right? Are you charged with anything? What are you here for? If they can't answer those, then you do what you did and shut the door. Go away.
Yes.
And do it politely. Don't give them an excuse, right? This is advice for listeners. If you are ever approached by the police in this sort of situation, don't get upset. Turn your camera on, record everything so that there's no he said, she said. If it ends up anywhere, involving courts or anything like that, you've actually got video evidence of the encounter. Be polite, but be firm and know your rights.
I said my pleases and thanks yous.
Yeah, I know. You were very pleasant in that video. In my case, I simply said to the police officers, well, your reason to come to my house is stipulated by law, and the law says you have to give me 7 days notice of that, and you haven't given me 7 days notice, so you can leave.
Yes.
Right? Now, I know.
I mean, if you know the law, then yeah.
I know people in my club, in Antique Arms, who say to me when they hear the story, and they said, oh, you're brave. I said, well, what would you have done? Would you have allowed them to break the law? Because I won't allow the police to break the law. Right.
Which I think does make you brave, though, mate. Maybe you don't recognise it.
Well, I don't know, mate. Brave or stupid? I don't know. Well, maybe the listeners can text that in as Cam brave or stupid.
Tell me the poll at the end, mate.
Look, I really feel for you. I've been in a similar situation. I know what it's like when the big blue gang turns up and they've got the resources of the state behind them and effectively threatening or, obtusely accusing you of something that you don't know what it is, and they're hoping that you'll tell them and hang yourself. Because that's
exactly
that's what it looked like. They were trying to do.
Yeah, and in saying that, it's not only that, it's the embarrassment, mate. I mean, I was very embarrassed posting that video. I mean, no one wants to show the world that you got cops on your front door, I had to tell, one of my bosses, hey, this has happened to me, just in case he's wondering why I'm a bit missing in action at work. It's quite an embarrassing situation. That's not really of your making, I didn't commit any crimes, but now I've got to share this information with people that, hey, the police have turned up on my door. It is embarrassing. That's what I'd say.
It does raise, I know you're seeking legal advice. There may be an avenue there. It does raise some questions. As I've said, how did they get your details? There could have actually been a privacy breach here, at least from the telecommunications company that supplies your mobile number and account. They've given the numbers out to the police. Did they do it with a warrant? Was the valid? A mate of mine, he had his house raided, and when he saw the warrant, he saw that it had expired 3 days earlier. And everything they took out of his house in that raid, and it was nothing. He was never charged with anything. Everything had to be handed back, and he got an apology from the police because the warrant had expired. So the police are quite willing to break the law to get what they want. And I really question whether they've, how they obtained a warrant. Did they get it from a judge, or did they get the warrant from, some patsy, JC that they told a story to? Because to get the information from an anonymous Twitter account suggests that they had to go through several steps to get that.
Look, I'm no expert on this, but I've got a Freedom of Information Request Act in to the police, and hopefully that will provide some clarity. And I'm more than willing to share that with you, Cam, no matter what's in it, because of your help you've given me and the exposure. and I want you to be fully prepared as well, because you've stuck your neck out on the line, and I don't know what it's in it, right? So neither do you. So, but in saying that, I thought this Five Eyes situation we're in, where the government can just go to, say, Australia or Canada and say, hey, mate, can you search my body and tell me all the details? Yeah. And then no laws are broken because the Australians have spied and they're just passing information on to New Zealand. So no warrants are required, right? And we get our civil rights are bypassed.
Yeah, that's a valid concern. There'd be many people out there would be sitting here nodding, going, that's a possibility. But then that raises the Big Brother type aspects. Are we going to witness the extension of these sorts of powers under the guise of protecting us all, and end up in a similar situation where you're getting grannies arrested because they said something mean on Twitter or X or Facebook?
Yeah, well, as far as I'm concerned, that's the inevitable future, which is kind of depressed me over this last week. When you're raising kids in a country that you think, geez, when they're my age, will they be in a gulag?
Yeah, will we have a social credit score system like they do in China, where you can't even travel or buy anything because you've said something rude against the regime?
Oh, come on! If there's a social credit score, mate, my kids will be in a gulag, mate. They won't be on the street.
They'll be educated by the state.
Yeah, well, yeah. I fully see us going that way. It's just we're following the UK pattern. When the UK brought in the hate speech laws, we brought in the guy who wrote the UK's hate speech laws and said, can you write ours? Well, Labor did, right? So you can see the pattern, and the behaviour by the police is already happening. What's happening today, last week to me, was what was happening in England 4 or 5 years ago. And now look at what they're doing today. So
yeah,
there could be a bit of a time frame.
We're on a slippery slope, and that's why it's important to tell these stories so that there's plenty of people out there know what we are up against. And the only way that I can see to defeat it is to, effectively, point at the police and laugh at them, do a Nelson from The Simpsons, ha ha, and shame them into behaving properly.
Yes. Yeah, to be fair, Cameron, that's I've argued the same on Twitter, that social shame is a very powerful motivator.
Yeah.
Right? And that probably is the only thing we have left as the public that we can actually use against, the police or the state in terms of protecting our rights.
Well, it's very important that people know their rights and they do stand up for themselves when they're confronted by situations like this. And for that, I commend you. And I also commend you for having the guts to come on to this show and talk to me about a very stressful situation. For that, I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're more than welcome, Cam, and thank you all for your support over this tough time for me, mate. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're most welcome. All right, Gareth, I'll leave you with that. You can go back to your family. I can hear them in the background there. So, go and give them a big hug because they've probably been a bit stressed.
Yeah. No, well, I think they can see their dad a bit stressed, mate, which does impact the kids. So, but thank you very much, mate. We'll go back to the kids now.
All good, mate. Thank you for coming on The Crunch.
Yes.
You really have no comprehension of how stressful these situations can be, especially when the police arrived armed and with threats. And they make no mistake here. Police were threatening Gareth with loss of his firearms and licence, all for saying rude and intemperate things on X. Now, Gareth held the line, but if we don't call out this behaviour, it won't be long before we see similar scenes playing out just like they do in the UK, but right here in New Zealand. What do you think? Email inbox at realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Hugh Devereaux Mack is returning to the show today because there are a few things firearms related that I want to talk to him about. And I'll certainly raise Gareth's interaction with the police that is all over social media. And then I'll chat to him about the dishonesty of Police Association boss Chris Cahill. Welcome back to The Crunch, Hugh Devereaux Mack from Colfo. Hugh, I didn't think I was going to have you on the show quite so soon after our last interview, but there's been a lot happening.
Look, with all the changes that are happening around gun reform and all the news that keeps coming out day to day, it's unsurprising we're back so quickly.
Let's start off with Chris Cahill. We'll get that out of the way. I wrote an article on Tuesday calling him a functional idiot. And I saw you had a press release put out on Tuesday, which was a bit more polite than me, but essentially the same thing, calling out Chris Cahill for just making stuff up.
Yeah, so obviously, for those who don't know, Chris Cahill has recently gone after Minister McKee, saying that she is not the right person to be leading the firearms law review because she was a gun lobbyist beforehand, and therefore she's always automatically biased. Now, one of the first things to clear up is that she's never been a paid gun lobbyist. The role that I now hold and that she held previously, it's all voluntary. The only reason we do this is because we care about our community and we were sick of watching them get treated poorly following the Christchurch terror attack. That's what brought me in, and that's what got her into Parliament, because she cared enough to stand up for her community. And for the record, while she was with Colfo, she actually lobbied against the Ardern-chaired committee that weakened gun laws when they cut the budget to the police vetting process. The police budgets were cut. That meant that the licensing team had less money to work with, and so they started cutting corners, which potentially, although Cahill has said Nicole's work as a pro-gun lobbyist contributed to Christchurch, which is outrageous beyond belief, her work actually was trying to prevent something like Christchurch happening. So to get that out of the way, Cahill is, I would never call him a functional idiot because I think he's very good at what he's doing. I think he's trying to set himself up in a role in politics after he leaves the police union, which may be having to come sooner rather than later, considering his botched pay negotiations on their behalf recently. But he is a paid lobbyist. He is on the police payroll, but he's also not subject to IPCA, which is an interesting loophole for him.
Totally. I had a lot of respect for Greg O'Connor and still do. When he was in that role, he seemed to take a more conciliatory approach to, problem areas like firearms law. I had a couple of meetings with him a couple of times to talk about various different issues. Just really pleasant guy to deal with. I can't say the same for Cahill and the police association, particularly with the emotive way that they are spreading actually misinformation. Like if you want to, knock on the door of people who are spreading misinformation, go and knock on Cahill's door, because he's just making stuff up. Like for example, what we're talking about now, he's come out against the minister because he says that police association hasn't been included in public consultation for the new the revised bill. Well, consultation hasn't opened yet.
You're completely right.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's not the only one who's come out in the media. Gun Control New Zealand and this new group, Keeping Our Communities Safe, as well as a few others, have said, we haven't been involved in the consultation process and it's shady, trying to undermine Minister McKee's process. Realistically, all that's happened is a scoping document to figure out, okay, what's the lay of the land before we even start drafting a bill? And in fact, Cahill has his public temper tantrums that he's had in the media are exactly why the police association and the union have not been included in these discussions, because he's proven he hasn't got the fit and proper temperament to be part of that. Police, however, as in the real police run by the commissioner, are part of the Minister's Advisory Arms Forum and FCAF, which is the Firearms Advisory Committee, which Gun Control New Zealand and others sit on. It's a joint working group across multiple beliefs, pro and anti-gun, who work together to create good laws. That's how it should be. Cahill isn't fit to have one of those positions, which is why he was excluded.
Now, one of the statements he made to the New Zealand Herald and other media was that Nicole McKee had obstructed law changes that would have prevented the Christchurch massacre, ignoring completely that the Royal Commission found clear and obvious failings on behalf of the police in the vetting process for giving this clown a license in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's undeniable that the police failed us. The Royal Commission report found that when it came to vetting people, which again, Nicole argued should be strengthened and the budget should be maintained for that, they failed to vet the terrorist correctly and then granted him a license. Now, for all we know, although it's been sort of black boxed until, I don't know what the black box years was, but it was a few years now, the person who signed and stamped his license and his ammunition would likely have been one of Cahill's members, was an active serving police officers and most likely a member of his union. But somehow he thinks that, I don't know, we should focus on Nicole's lobbying and then ignore the fact that why are police technically involved in this when they were the ones who caused the problem in the first place? If we want to be consistent in logic, then Cahill would say, actually, police shouldn't be there either because they were the ones who directly contributed rather than making an abstraction that Nicole contributed.
This is the interesting thing too. He's complaining about a process that hasn't occurred yet and that it's going to be a truncated process or a shortened process for consultation, which is a bit rich really because he was front and centre justifying a 3-day public consultation process for the 2019 amendments. And I know people who tried to submit in that process and were denied a voice. And so it's a bit rich for him to come out and say that now. And then when you look at the overwhelming evidence that was provided in the submissions in 2019, it was against the very things that they then implemented, and the politicians just ignored people like you, people like me who are experts in handling firearms, are reputable members of collectors associations, etc. They ignored all of our recommendations and then implemented this mishmash of really what I consider to be a grab bag of police hierarchy wet dreams on how to control firearms.
Yep, exactly so. So it's funny that the other team tends to only cry foul when presented with a fair process that doesn't allow them special access or privileges over the rest of us. Cahill will still have the right to submit, as will all other New Zealanders, to the law changes. It's just that he hasn't, prioritized getting a seat on FCAF previously because he had direct access through a sort of, a softer or a patsy government. When it comes to those changes itself, I can't imagine that anyone on our team would be happy if we only had 48 hours of consultation on behalf of those who are speaking against us, because we need to ensure that all voices have a proper seat at the table and are heard if we want the new laws to last the next, say, 50 years and actually reduce gun crime in the way they promised us that these rushed versions after 2019 would. Clearly, going by the media statements and the number of gun crime occurring, it has failed and we need to look at it again.
It's totally failed. I mean, the 1983 Arms Act, I actually had a bit of a backroom involvement in writing some aspects of that. And it was a good law. But where it fell down is that the police wouldn't follow the law and they let things get out of hand. And then they ended up with a government in the form of the Ardern regime where they could go and basically whisper their dreams into her ear, or their police minister. And then all of a sudden, which was Stuart Nash, of course, and then Chris Hipkins and then Ginny Anderson. But they got whatever they wanted, but they didn't actually go through the process of putting those changes to the law to the public. They didn't actually go through that process because they bypassed it using orders in council, which ended up with a mishmash of competing interests that when you actually scratch the surface, don't actually stand the test of time. And you end up in a situation where, that you had police officers, and this is still happening, standing down the road from a gun club, catching people who have come out of the gun club, and then saying to them, "Can we look in your car?" without actually realizing that they can't. They can't, by law, look in the car to see how the firearms are being transported to support their order in council, which said firearms had to be and that's a completely nuts regulation that someone who has a moderate collection of firearms that's going to a shooting event would be in breach of automatically because you just can't, secure that many firearms in the car. It's just ridiculous.
There's a lot of ridiculous things happening out of the police recently. One of the ones that we've heard recently is a complaint or a letter that Colfer was sent on behalf of a airsoft range, saying that anyone who wanted to run an airsoft, that is plastic BBs, would need to have a dealer's license for the range, and any of their staff that handled them would need an ACAT firearms license. That would apply not only to the BB guns for airsoft, but also gel blasters and paintball fields. Now, where is the logic in that? I understand that police would like us to move and follow the Australian format, which they've stated recently as a result of, the funniest one that came out this week, which was almost missed, was that they want to ban CAD files for 3D printers that could allow criminals to 3D print firearms.
How are they going to do that?
I mean, we haven't managed to beat piracy in films and music or any other area, yet suddenly we're now going to police CAD files. How much resource is that going to take, and how much is that going to be unsuccessful? But the nice part of that was they admitted that, well, because of the register, quote unquote, the police and criminals are now looking for other sources of firearms, and 3D printing and manufacturing is going to be the next thing they're concerned about, as well as converting gel blasters, which is why they want to ban those. Now that they're thinking of the export, what I enjoyed is the fact that only 7% of all of the shipping containers that come into New Zealand are actually searched. So I'm not that great at maths, but 93% of them are bringing in drugs or firearms illegally as a rough number. Every time we see drugs seized at the border, because of the good work that actual police officers and actual custom officers do, there's guns in almost every single one of those deliveries. So the other one is only 2% of the firearms that that police have seized from criminals had a serial number on them. So that is starting to undermine the register, and I'm looking forward to that coming out as part of this review process, because police are going to have to justify why we're spending $200 million on this thing that clearly isn't working.
Well, anyone who's got a moderate collection of firearms and has interacted with the register knows that the register isn't working. And I wrote about my case. I own a Vickers machine gun. It's a beautiful machine gun. It's in pretty good order. It's a pretty special one too, because it was sold to the Egyptian army towards the end of World War II. And in 1967, in the Six-Day War, was captured by the Israelis. Well, the Israelis had a mountain of surplus ammunition from World War II, ironically from the Germans, in 8mm Mauser. So they converted that machine gun to 8mm Mauser. So when I went to register it on the register, I could register a Vickers machine gun in 303 British, which is what most of them
standard.
And yes, there was one there that I could register, as this is the model, and it's a Vickers machine gun Mark 1. They only even made one mark, but that's what it said, in 8mm Mauser. And then it said to me, what is the capacity of the box magazine? Now, it wouldn't let me register the firearm unless I put a number in for the capacity of the box magazine. And anyone who knows what they're talking about knows that a Vickers machine gun is belt fed.
Yep.
It doesn't have a box magazine. And so I've had to put a number in there. Now I put 200 in because that's the capacity of a belt, 200 rounds. But I'm waiting for the police to come knocking on my door saying, where's your box magazine that holds 200 rounds, and why haven't you registered that?
Yep.
Because that's how stupid the system is.
The funny thing is, the people who design, I've seen that exact problem where it gives you can't put 0 for magazine, because obviously, like you said, it doesn't have one. And it gives you the option between like 1 and 99,999. And you're like, yes, so I have 100,000 round box magazine or magazine. Yeah. This makes complete sense. But it just shows you the people who design the system, okay, sure, they might be very good at technology, but they had no expertise in firearms. And we spent a lot of money to get it.
I mean, I know a guy who's a senior member of the Antique Arms Association, rung up by the police just 2 weeks ago. We're calling about this firearm. He says, I don't own that firearm. I said, no, this is a firearm with this serial number. And he works in the firearms industry. And he said, that sounds like a serial number for a Ruger firearm, not a serial number for a Mauser. And they argued with him over and over again. And he said, look, you're just being too stupid, and hung up on them. And then he's got a notice being sent out for him.
Oh, he's in breach. He's an unfit and improper person for not complying with the rules and arguing with police. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing that Chris Cahill bangs on about, and gun control, and now that AstroTurf group that has, Michael Wood in it, he's the same guy that told us that we're going to get a bike bridge for $1 billion. So he's not really got any credibility, nor does he have any expertise in firearms that I'm aware of. But these groups all say that we need to have the register to stop straw buyers. And then when you ask the police, how many cases of straw buyers have you come across? It's a single-digit number.
Yep, it is 6%. And that 6%. Was from police figures that we ran a couple of years back through Colfo. We OIA'd it, and there was an ombudsman challenge. We ombudsman challenged actually because Cahill went in the media. It was on Breakfast TV. He said that licensed firearms owners were the primary source of criminal weapons. And we're like, well, we haven't seen any evidence of that, and the numbers we've seen were counter to it. Can you please clarify? Ombudsman then let us know that 4% of the criminal firearms that were seized were stolen and theft, and 6% were sold from straw buyers, as you say. Now, I don't know how maths in the police or TPP work, or the police association, to separate the two clearly, but 10% is not the majority. He then modified his statements a few weeks later to the primary identifiable source, which is a nice little loophole that still leads the average New Zealander to think that we're the issue. But when they dig a little deeper into it, they realize we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on a project that was addressing potentially 10% of the criminal supply line. That doesn't sound like a good value.
No, but the other thing is they're using these percentages to hide the actual numbers, because what they're saying is that 6% of those that they've identified in criminal activity, but the way they say it, it makes it sound like 6% of firearms owners are involved, and it's not. It's a much. And when I say in single digits, it literally is single digits. It's under 10 incidences of straw buyers, and they say that the register is going to solve this problem. Yet every single person that they've caught that's been involved in a straw buying scheme has been caught before the register even existed.
Yep. The only thing that will stop these criminals doing straw buyers or criminals purchasing firearms or using them to do harm in communities is good old-fashioned police work. One thing that we look at is we have police officers who are looking to move to Australia and resigning from the force, and we have an issue with not enough officers on the ground. With the current government looking to make cutbacks in various areas and redirect it to essential services, you have to look at the register and say, is this a valuable use of money, or could it be used to train new officers and then maybe give pay rises to those who are already doing the job to incentivize them to stay? That to us is a better use of money than a register that will never track illegal firearms, can barely track the legal ones, and is already failing to be accurate, and we're less than 2 years in.
And again, the case in point is my own situation. You know, I've moved a number of pistols off my license onto another person's license simply for storage purposes. They're still on my license. Even though we've gone through a permitting process, a transfer process that was laborious on both parties' parts, if I log into the arms register today, they're all still on my license. Yep. And it's sitting there. And what will happen is if a police officer comes to my place and says, we'd like you to produce this firearm, I can't produce that firearm even though it's on my license, even though I assign, and that's the other thing with pistols. You can't do a transfer like an A category firearm where you can send the transfer to another person and they accept it. It has to be done using members of the Firearms Authority. So they haven't done it. They haven't done and completed the whole process. Well, that was 3 months ago. So, you know, I know that's a mess. That's a number that's more than 10.
Yep.
Right? That is now showing on two people's licenses.
Yeah, and the problem will only get worse the more people start registering firearms. And most of us, are doing our best to avoid it. I know I'm personally holding off purchasing firearms or doing any activating ones because I don't want to go through listing, and my father as well. many New Zealanders who, especially those who live rurally where police officers are spread thin already. We know rural policing is a real problem with the South Island. I think it's like Central Canterbury area has 2 police for the entire region. So if they end up in trouble, if armed gang members turn up to their house to rob their homes, they're going to say, look, you know what? Take my guns, take whatever you need, because just leave my family alone.
And
I can't
put them in the car.
Yep, exactly. You'll do whatever it takes to keep your family safe. And as soon as that, and it is a matter of when, not if, that register leaks, I would wonder if we have a case to then legally go after either police or those who administer the system for some form of compensation. Because the only way we can then protect ourselves is either get rid of our guns and make it public that we've got rid of them, or move houses, which then would simply change the address we're living at, but it wouldn't change the fact that, well, you know I already own these guns, so criminals could look up your name again and find you. It's a really scary situation for any licensed firearms owner to be in.
Speaking of scary situations for licensed firearms owners to be in, there's a case that's come up in the past week where a person who has a firearms license has an anonymous account on X or Twitter. And it's a bit of a troll, and, you know, he's had a few swipes of me along the way. But he had police turn up on his doorstep just after dinner time, all big cheery smiles on their face. And he videoed this, and you've seen this video. And all of a sudden started essentially threatening him, where they said, we want to have a chat with you. And he said, what about? So we don't want to talk about that. Can we come in? He said, no, I don't want you to come in. No, thank you. Don't want to be involved. And it turns out that they were contacting him using a report to the Firearms Authority as an excuse to shake him down and suggest to him that perhaps he's not being a fit and proper person by making outrageous comments on Twitter. Now, I've spoken to this fellow, and he says, you know, I've seen some of his tweets over the time, and they're a little bit rude, but they're nothing terribly offensive. But we've got a situation where the police are rocking up, armed police are rocking up, saying there's been a report that you've, you know, essentially committed some hate crimes on Twitter, and, you know, that's going to affect your firearms license. And then I saw the constable say to him with a big smile on her face, you have obligations that you need to meet, and we don't think you're meeting them.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane. You know, that you say something on social media, and this is what's happening in the UK, and it seems that it's come here now.
Yeah, there are a couple of things to unpack here. And I think the first one is to actually praise this guy for his response. I would hope that all licensed firearms owners, now that they've seen this video or have heard about it, understand that police as it stands are not friends of licensed firearms owners, unfortunately. They used to be, but that situation has now changed, and we hope we can repair that over time. But in the meantime, the best things they can do is, well, the best protection is, unfortunately, grab your cell phone and start recording any of the interactions you have. Now, ask them very clearly why they're there, get that on camera. Don't allow them to speak to you off of camera. And if they insist on pushing for it, contact your lawyer and say, look, I'm happy to come down to the station and speak to you about these things, but I want representation. If you need a firearms dedicated lawyer, Colfo has some available that we use regularly and have quite a good success rate of getting licenses reinstated after they've been suspended. But it does come back to the idea that police right now are judge, jury, and executioner, and what they say goes with licensed firearms owners. That's something that needs to change. The idea that things that you post on social media could threaten your fit and proper status is a real problem because, yes, joke and parody accounts and things like that have always existed. Freedom of speech has some limitations. You cannot say, I don't know, cry fire or do something to induce panic in a crowd. Fair enough, that would make you a dick anyway. And you can't call for violence against someone else like, I want to do X or I wish someone would do violence towards X person. That's never acceptable, and we can understand that, right? From a licensed firearms owner's perspective. But simply making jokes or criticizing or stating an ideology that is against the common narrative, that isn't enough to define you as an unfit and improper or a danger to society, which is what we really need to factor in. Does someone's social media post make them a real threat and danger to the people around them if they own firearms? I can't speculate too much on this guy's post because I haven't seen a lot of them. But from what I've heard, it didn't seem to me that he crossed that line.
No, I mean, as I said, I've had interactions with him in the past, and he's what you'd call a troll, right? But the police turned up and were saying, well, these are concerning. You know, they could say, I guess this is a safety issue. But if it was a safety issue, then wouldn't they be a little bit more forceful other than smiling happily and then turning around and leaving? So it can't have been a safety issue, because here they were at the door basically using implied threats, telling him to tone it down. That's essentially what they were doing. And then, you know, what she was quoting was in the legislation about his obligations as a fit and proper person has no standing in law. I mean, it doesn't even exist in the law what the definition of a fit and proper person actually is, right?
Yeah, that definitely needs clarifying. And one of the interesting ones, and you made a great point there, which is if this was a genuine safety threat, police have the right, without a search warrant, to go into an individual who has a firearms license at home and take their firearms and put them through the revocation process. This clearly did not breach that, otherwise they would have gone ahead and do it. I've heard of that process happening for a lot less than social media posts. I've heard it happening because of ex-girlfriends complaining about anonymous email messages. We've heard it about just phone calls from colleagues just saying, essentially like, I feel this person might be a threat. And police respond very quickly to that. The threshold for that probably needs clarifying. But if there was any form of actual threat to this guy, he wouldn't have his firearms license now. It'd be a revocation. He wouldn't have his firearms on him. They would have taken that. So the fact that they just turned up very smiley, told him to tone it down, that's a concern. And I think this is probably only getting credit because he recorded it. I want to know how many other times and how many people this has happened to who didn't have a camera on them to record the interaction and didn't have the confidence to say, no, you're not coming into my house. I'd like representation or I don't want to interact with you. That takes a lot of balls, considering having armed police at your house saying we're coming in and to say, actually, no, you're not. Yeah, full credit to this guy for how he responded.
He was very calm and basically, you know, said to them, no, I'm not interested in having this discussion. Don't care what you've got to say. And, you know, he actually asked them, am I under arrest? No. Am I being detained? No. Well, you can leave then. And, you know, you're right. This happens more often than not. And I know Rachel Stewart went through a similar situation, and I know I went through a similar situation. 2 armed police officers knocking on the door under the pretense of inspecting my safe. Mm-hmm. Right? I knew what the law was, and I said, well, you haven't made an appointment. Make an appointment, and you need to give me 7 days notice, and you can leave now. And They threatened me. They said, this won't go well for you. That's what they actually said. And I said, I'm prepared to take that chance. But if you don't stand up to them and actually point out what the law is, and you know, I've had you know, firearms safety authority people at my house asking me to do things that are outside the law. And then I point out to them, no, that's not in the law. If you show me in the law where it says I have to do that, I'll comply. So here's the law. I've got it on my phone. Show me which clause that applies to that. You know, they were asking me to remove 4 stocks from my double-barrel shotguns because that's what it said in their guide. Show me where it says in the law. And they couldn't. You know,
it's not a bad idea to, as well as the storage requirements that we have for our firearms, which we all obey, it's probably not a bad idea for most people just to print out a copy of the Arms Act, just have it sitting on the top of your safe so that when they come in and say something, you say, right, here's the document and piece of paper. Can you just point to that where I'm incompliant? Like if I'm not complying as a licensed firearms owner, I want to make sure that I'm in step with the law. Just point it out to me. Otherwise, please stop asking, because police policy, whatever they write, is not the law. But for whatever reason, that line has become blurred, and probably because they've built a nice little kingdom for themselves in firearms safety. as not administrate. Well, they have been administrators of the law, but enforcement. That's why we think those two powers need to be separated clearly.
Yeah, and that's what Nicole McKee and the ACT Party have promised to do, separate those, because there's a need for it. There's too many stories of firearms owners who are being improperly detained or improperly questioned or improperly, put through various different hoops that they have to jump through that aren't even remotely connected to the law. And then if you look at the success rate of the police in prosecuting firearms owners, it's pretty bad. They get before a judge and the judge is saying, why is this even here? And it's being dismissed because they don't get the law right. The police do not follow the laws they're supposed to uphold.
Agreed. And the problem for us is that once a licensed firearms owner who is not in breach of the law, but police have put them through this mentally taxing as well as financially expensive legal process, we then spend our money on a lawyer and everything else. We maybe have our reputation damaged with our neighbors because we have armed police in their full gear and squad cars turning up at our doors, embarrassing us and treating us like criminals. After all that's occurred, we then get our licenses back and they say, don't do it again in a letter. And it's like, A, we didn't do it in the first place, but also I'm out, let's say $15,000, $20,000 of legal fees for what? Do I have no right of going back after police to say, look, actually, if you wrongfully prosecute someone or go after them and they're acquitted, then you must pay the legal fees. I wonder if that would be a step towards preventing this bullying behavior that we see from police towards licensed firearms owners.
Yeah, I think that would be very important to have happen. Now, this incident here is, I don't see the media picking it up, without smearing this poor guy. But what we are seeing, though, is this concerted, I'll call it proselytizing, because they're promoting a particular angle that they want to. But you see the police association, you see the police, and now you've got Customs. I don't know if you've seen the video that Customs released or was involved with the New Zealand Herald in having basically a moral panic about parts of firearms coming into the country. And in that video, this Customs guy was obviously using rehearsed lines because he couldn't remember them. And there's classic tells that you can see that. And he makes this statement. He said, "Oh, look, it's very serious. Like, for example, this was one of the example days. For example, this is a cleaning kit for an M3 machine pistol." Yeah, and your eyes are rolling back in. There's no such thing as an M3 machine pistol. It's never been called a machine pistol. There is an M3 machine gun or submachine gun, right, which was in World War II. But he was saying this is a cleaning kit for one. All cleaning kits are not a restricted or prohibited item. So why was it even being presented to the media in terms of the New Zealand Herald as something that was of concern?
I think one of the things that we see continuously from the anti-gun groups, police, those sort of groups, is that when they do not have facts to back up their positions, they rely on emotionally misleading and manipulating the public and media to push their narrative. It's the Gun Control New Zealand's founder, Hera Cook, had a really great debate line when she talked to a Canadian pro-gun group, which was, "I don't think we're going to get very far talking about facts." And I think that sums up the basis of their entire position. If they are asked to speak and provide evidence for their positions, they cannot. So they fall back on tragedies like Christchurch. They fall back on, oh, these MSSAs are coming back or semi-auto guns are coming back. And as we talked about on last time on your show, it's like these firearms never left. They're just more restricted. But when you say these to regular listeners, they're like, but they told us we were safe. I'm like, I understand that's what you were told, but unfortunately you were sold a lie in a very convincing and emotional package. We can't allow emotion to dictate the next set of law reforms.
Well, this situation, this emotional blackmail, I guess, and gaslighting that comes from the police and the anti-gun people has even pervaded its way into the minds of judges. Because I know of a case that's currently before the courts, And the judge is saying, well, these are prohibited magazines. Why do you want to register them? They're prohibited. And that's the whole problem, is the police came up with this, nomenclature, a name of a type of firearm that was prohibited. Well, I don't know about them, but when I went to school, prohibited means you can't have it. I've got prohibited firearms, prohibited magazines, and restricted all sorts of other stuff. They're not prohibited at all, but this judge thinks, oh, well, you can't have it because it's prohibited. Well, actually, you can have it if you're a dealer, if you have various different prohibited firearms license categories. The most common is P6 and P7, which is what I've got. You can have these, so they're not prohibited at all, which is your point. They haven't gone away. They haven't been destroyed. They haven't gone anywhere. They've just been moved into a different category.
Yeah, and I mean, they existed in a different category before the law changes under the ECAT licenses and all the rest of them. So this changing of language to benefit what has to be political motives is something that should be cleared up as part of the new gun law reforms. Like, we need to, because of rushed law changes and things that have happened over the years of progressive weakening of the original Arms Act. It's time that we look at that and say, look, we understand that over time and after the Christchurch terror attack, they were weakened. We knew that already because we see gun crime rising. They focus on law-abiding citizens and not punishing criminals. The justice system probably has a lot to answer for there, allowing criminals to plead down actual firearms crimes. So if we take it back to the drawing board, as Nicole McKee is hoping to, and we hope that the national government can also sort of have a bit of a backbone and support good gun laws. We hope that Mark Mitchell can likewise stand up against the likes of Cahill and those lobbyists to say, we want good gun laws that keep us safe. This is how we get there. And we want everyone to have a place at the table. That should be not a controversial position, but apparently, according to the media, it is. Don't understand it.
I can't understand this attack on Nicole McKee saying because she was a gun lobbyist, she shouldn't be looking into firearms legislation. That'd be like saying Mark Mitchell can't be the police minister because he used to be a policeman, or Judith Collins can't be the Attorney General because she's a lawyer. Yeah, it's an insane position, yet it's a position that they're pushing through the media.
It seems to be the position that if you are an expert or passionate about an area, then you have no right to speak to that area. And like you say, it means that doctors are never allowed to be consulted or have a position in health.
Like he can't be the health minister because he's
apply it to any other area of government other than guns, and their logic breaks down, which means that their logic isn't sound on guns either. And I mean, it's not like she's doing this as a standalone, without any other consultation or any other. The government process for setting bills and turning them into laws is well and truly established. It works for everything else. And people who are trying to undermine that process, whether it's Cahill or others, I think are more problematic to the diplomatic process than Nicole McKee, an expert in firearms, leading the reforms on gun laws.
I mean, again, you've got to come back to what is the public risk, and there's this perception that guns are a real problem, but actually more people die from motor car accidents than die from firearms by a long way, like by an order of magnitude of hundreds. There's no need for this. It's like the changes that the police pushed through under Stuart Nash around transporting firearms in cars. If you ask the police how many cars have firearms been stolen from, they'll give you a number. And then you say, okay, now how many is it if you exclude police cars from that number? And the answer is almost none. So they're creating laws for things that have not and are unlikely to occur. But they put this moral panic out there that, we need to do something because people are transporting firearms in cars. Well, we've been doing it since Adam was a boy.
Yep. And I mean, we had the same outrage when it came to the clubs and ranges changes. So the big secret thing was an order in council was done to reduce the reporting requirements of clubs and ranges, who are mostly volunteer run. The things that were changed were specifically reporting their financials at the end of the year. Now, most clubs and ranges are either non-profits or charitable organizations, so they report those financials anyway as part of their obligations under other laws. So it was removing a doubling up of that process. That didn't need to go through a full consultation process with FIANs and everyone else, but they then complained they weren't involved. It's like, well, you weren't involved because you're not experts in the area. You're unaffected by this, and there isn't a public safety concern with saying, you know what, you have to file this piece of paper twice. And it does take a considerable amount of time for these volunteers to fill out and do.
And again, how many incidences, criminal incidences, have occurred at gun ranges? I'd say the answer is zero.
Yeah, I mean, criminals don't turn up to gun ranges.
Yeah, even if you went to ACC and said, how many injuries involving firearms have occurred at gun ranges, I would suggest the answer would be zero.
We actually have those numbers, and I can send them to you after this, but it was the injury rates on both pistol ranges and long arms for the last 15 years. Yeah. It was, as you say, it was marginal. When it came to long firearm ranges, when you exclude police and military, there were no incidents of injuries at committing. This is in the period that was obviously before the ranges were police compliant, quote unquote, as well as afterwards. And when you looked at the numbers, the most injuries occurred on pistol ranges, which were fully vetted and police compliant before the changes came in place. And if we wanted to be cheeky about it, you could say that actually you were more at risk being on a registered range than you were at an unregistered range based on the injury numbers. So the paperwork and the additional compliance that brought in didn't improve public safety at all, but it did give the impression that police were doing something about clubs and ranges because the Christchurch terrorists went to a rifle club a couple of times. It made everyone feel better, but again, it was a well-packaged misdirection and deceiving of the public.
Yeah, and if you remove the police and the armed forces injuries from rifle ranges or pistol ranges, then the answer is a very small number.
And when you look at the number of people who are injured, especially like injured or fatally killed in New Zealand, it can be relatively high until, unfortunately, you remove the suicide numbers. Once you remove those from the figure, it becomes a non-issue for us. Every death is a tragedy, obviously, and we don't want criminals out there doing harm with firearms. But it's not as bad as you'd think when you look at the media and see the multiple times that it's reported and the sensationalism around it. Because, well, gun crime sells newspapers and it buys clicks.
Yeah, there's an old saying in the media, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yep, absolutely. And if it goes bang, then people will want to read it.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to get you on the show to talk about those couple of incidences. I'm sure we're going to have plenty more as the heat ramps up against Nicole McKee and her attempts to get some sensible gun laws rather than the mishmash that we've got now. So, you're always welcome on my show to talk about these issues in the way that you have, with facts, figures, and actual, proof that this is the reality of the situation. And when we're hearing the media, other media and the police and the various different gun control groups or grass, astroturf groups like Michael Wood's one, that they're actually using emotional blackmail almost or gaslighting, and almost none of their claims are stacked up by any facts.
Yeah, I think final thoughts on this one is thank you for having us on. It's always a pleasure to sort of sit and have a level-headed conversations about the issues facing not only licensed firearms owners, but that can then be applied to all New Zealanders. But when it comes to the issues of the day, Nicole McKee has never been a paid gun lobbyist, despite what our opponents would continuously claim in the press. She has not only fought on behalf of strengthening gun laws prior to 2019, but she continues to consult with not only the pro-gun groups directly impacted by the changes that will be put into place as part of this law reform, but also the opponents to ensure that everyone has a seat at the table, all the facts and evidence are considered, as well as the opinions and feelings of others to make sure that we're all on board with the law changes. And as it stands, there is no person in Parliament who is more expert or qualified to lead this than Minister Nicole McKee. Anyone who has a problem with that should probably, run for Parliament themselves or make their submissions as part of the public consultation process and support the democratic process of lawmaking.
And that is a very good note to end this chat. And
thank you.
Thank you for coming on The Crunch again, Hugh, at short notice.
Happy to be here.
Hugh is passionate about his hobby and interests, and he's certainly taking it to the police association. The way the police association, and anti-gun lobbyists are reacting to a democratic process, letting those most affected by law changes have a say, is as rude as it is alarming. We need more debate, not less. Tell me what you think. Email inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You've heard the words open, fair, both sides of the story. It's easy to say them, but practicing them often seems like a bridge too far. New Zealand, it's time for a reality check. Reality check. RCR, Reality Check Radio. Rational discussion, common sense, and open debate for real. With me, Paul Brennan.
You know, you just can't make this stuff up. You couldn't write the script.
Veteran broadcaster Peter Williams.
Where is the evidence they actually make a difference? It turns out that was a very fair question to ask.
Taking on the mainstream, Chantel Baker.
Mainstream media, as usual, in their little perch.
The man who cares so much and whose background is for real, Rodney Hyde.
The doctors don't believe them. They can't get ACC. They can't work. They're told it's all in their head.
Along with a raft of contributors to inform, entertain, and bring the truth back to New Zealand media. It's time for a reality check, all right. RCR, Reality Check Radio at www.realitycheck.radio. We've arrived.
This is The Crunch with Cam Slater. Conversations with a side of controversy, right here on RCR.
Olivia's Views is coming right now. Olivia, what have you got for us?
What I have today is titled Freedom of Speech is Our Lodestar. I'll launch right on in. To preserve the freedom of the human mind, then, and freedom of the press, every spirit should be ready to devote itself to martyrdom, for as long as we may think as we will and speak as we think, the condition of man will proceed in improvement. Enlightenment hero Thomas Jefferson wrote these words in a letter to his friend William G. Munford as they discussed the importance of science and advancing a culture of freedom for early America. It is instructive how closely linked freedom of speech was to freedom of thought in Jefferson's mind. The realm of thought and ideas is a sacred realm which literally no man, no tyrant, no outside oppressor can touch, simply because it happens in the privacy of our own heads. Our words to each other are an expression of those thoughts and ideas, but also a buffer zone separating thoughts from actions. I think of free speech as a midway point, a natural regulator between thoughts and actions. It remains the proper symposium to challenge ourselves and others as to which actions should be rightly acted upon and which should be disregarded as improper. It is so important as a human principle that Jefferson felt every person in a free society should be ready to devote themselves to martyrdom in order to preserve it. Free speech serves as a robust bulwark to fine-tune the thinking of human beings before we take actions. Free speech, then, truly is quite holy ground. We should revere it, guard it, fight for it, be bold with it, and be wise with it. In 1969, Kenneth Clarke made a wonderful series for the BBC titled Civilization, A Personal View. The series was an analysis of art and architecture from the ancient world through to the modern, describing how Western civilization was carried through the different eras by philosophy, Christianity, and the men of ability who shaped this human advancement. In the first episode titled By the Skin of Our Teeth, where Clark observed how close we came to losing it, he asked the question, what is civilization? He offered no abstract explanation of it, but rather said, I think I can recognize it when I see it, as he gazed across the Seine at the magnificence of Notre Dame Cathedral. The Byzantine Empire in the East outlived the Roman Empire in the West by 1,000 years, until the Ottomans finally sacked Constantinople in 1453. Until that time, the Byzantines had become the guardians of Christendom. From their vantage point, Western Europe was divided, tribal, messy, bloody, and without any sense of cohesion until Charlemagne unified it, at least for a time, during the 9th century. It was Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel, or Charles the Hammer, who pushed the Muslim invaders back at the Battle of Tours at the gates of Vienna, thus saving Western Europe from falling to Islam, but only by the skin of our teeth. Clark describes the conditions which create a civilization. In particular, he mentions a degree of material prosperity which allows for some leisure, but more than that, it takes confidence in a society's belief systems, confidence in one's own mental powers, along with vitality and the weight of energy to drive its development. Even more than these things, Clark put the building of civilization down to a sense of permanence, a stability capable of looking back to the past and connecting it meaningfully with an imagined future. That's how we got cathedrals, which took sometimes 200 years to build. While acknowledging that it took Edward Gibbon 9 volumes to lay out the reasons for the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, this episode has Clark surmising what can bring civilization to an end. Fear. Fear of war, fear of invasion, fear of the supernatural, which can result in a fear to question things. The impediments to civilization, according to Clark, are fear, boredom, and hopelessness. People hopelessly waiting for barbarians to come and sack them. If one asks the reason why ancient Greece and Rome collapsed, Clark said, the answer is that it was exhausted. This conclusion of Clark's, that the greatest civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome came to an end because of exhaustion, corresponds with Douglas Murray's book, The Strange Death of Europe, wherein Murray prognosticates that exhaustion lies at the heart of Europe's cultural apathy today. In particular, Murray cites exhaustion after 2 world wars, which took Europe to the brink of annihilation twice in 1 century. Then following that, guilt and shame over its indulgences in colonialism and the end of faith in Christianity, which seems to have died somewhere between communism and Nazism. Since then, the Islamic world has been too warmly welcomed into European lands, and we know that millions of Muslims refuse to assimilate into Western culture because religiously and culturally, they regard it as something immoral, something deserving of disrespect and violent assaults. My question is it exhaustion that is enabling Europe to quietly commit suicide by the invisible hand of chronic apathy? Or is it a mental immobilization caused from ingesting the worst ideas of the globalist left, which have dominated Europe's political class since the end of the Second World War? If the answer is the former, that it's exhausted, then it seems that all Europe can do is wait in fear for the invaders, already well inside their gates, to rise up and subjugate them. But if it is the latter, mental immobilization from ingesting the worst of ideas, then there may still be some hope, since the remedy is better ideas being exclaimed and demanded. But for that, they need freedom of speech, despite the left's clear intention of extinguishing it completely. Keir Starmer's recent crackdown on native Britons who protest seriously brutal immigrant crimes, and his promise to completely eradicate Islamophobia in the UK, is as chilling as it is dopey. He views criticism of Islam as some kind of racial crime, when we all know that Islam is an aggressive political ideology under a veneer of religion. Starmer's first act as Prime Minister was to quash the controversial Rwanda deportation plan, a plan to repatriate illegal immigrants from the UK in Rwanda, which should not be controversial at all, since boatloads of illegal immigrants do not have a right to live in a country they enter by breaking the law. Here's Dame Margaret Thatcher claiming that to not be able to return illegal immigrants to their countries of origin would be a recipe for international chaos, as we are now seeing.
Refugees, and that is determined again by the United Nations, will not be returned. Those who are illegal immigrants will be returned, and it is customary international law for countries to receive their own immigrants back into their country. And if the right honourable gentleman is suggesting that we ever get to a position when you cannot return illegal immigrants to their country of origin, then he is proposing international chaos.
The world has had so very many warnings over the last 20 years about what this would all come to if unheeded. Here is Christopher Hitchens talking about the newly coined term Islamophobia back in 2009.
This is very urgent business, ladies and gentlemen, I beseech you. Resist it while you still can, and before the right to complain is taken away from you, which will be the next thing. You will be told you can't complain because you're Islamophobic. The term is already being introduced into the culture as if it was an accusation of race hatred, for example, or bigotry, whereas it's only the objection to the preachings of a very extreme and absolutist religion. Watch out for these symptoms. They are just symptoms of surrender, very often ecumenically offered to you by men of God in other robes, Christian and Jewish and smarmy ecumenical. These are the ones who will hold open the gates for the barbarians. The barbarians never take a city till someone holds the gates open for them. And it's your own preachers who will do it for you, and your own multicultural authorities who will do it for you. Resist it while you can.
Resist it while you still can, indeed. This recent crackdown led by Keir Starmer on native Britons came on the back of little girls being stabbed to death at a dance event. This type of violence on British civilian life has been going on for decades now, and just yesterday, 3 more stabbings happened in the UK, another young 11-year-old girl and a 34-year-old woman in London's Leicester Square. Also, a young man was stabbed in Manchester last evening, and in Ireland, in Dublin, on a street packed with families to welcome home their Irish Olympians. 100 metres away on Marlborough Street, in broad daylight, a frenzied stabbing of one foreigner by another foreigner occurred. Keir Starmer is militantly deaf to these incidents, which are causing Anglo-Saxons to boil with anger about what has happened to their own country. By far the biggest terrorist threat comes from Islamist terrorism committed by Muslims. It accounts for 67% of attacks since 2018 and about 3/4 of MI5's caseload. 3/4. Yet all Starmer does is drone on and on about the mythical far right and how violent it is. Elon Musk's much anticipated huge interview with Donald Trump on X Spaces yesterday inspired a letter of warning from the European Commission demanding that Musk censor Donald Trump and threatened him with legal obligations if he fails to stop disinformation. Quote from the letter, "This notably means ensuring on one hand that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected, and, on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events, including live streaming, which, if unaddressed, might increase the risk profile of X and generate detrimental effects on civic discourse and public security," unquote. Where the heck do these people get off? Since when does the European Commission think that it can interfere with a private company in America regarding the free speech of a former president during an election? I think there's a name for that: election interference. Frankly, that's a serious diplomatic breach as well that the European Commission needs to be utterly excoriated for. I'm pleased to report that Elon ignored the letter and stated that the discussion between he and Trump will be released, and has been, to the public, unedited, as advertised. He also messaged them, that is the EU Commission, to go themselves in their own face. A perfect response in my book to these global fascists. The left are quite obviously terrified of Trump and Musk, since they both represent a return to the ultimate principle of thinking and speaking freely, as Thomas Jefferson intended, as the free world lodestar. And that is Olivia's view for the Crunch this week.
I'm glad you touched on the Trump interview with Elon Musk, because I tell you what, there was 2 hours of absolutely riveting and fascinating commentary that was streamed free to the world. And, I think in terms of replays and people who were listening at the time, I think at a peak time was about 1.2 million people listening at any one time. There's something like, I don't know, over 100 million people have gone and viewed it. Even if they only viewed some of it, that's just a huge, huge number of people that have been that have bypassed the media, basically.
Yeah, they've almost made the MSM irrelevant, haven't they?
Well, I mean, you have to think about this in respect of free speech moving forward. We don't have free speech when we have a cosseted media or a media that's compliant with various regimes around the world and censoring views or not even publishing views that the people in the media disagree with.
Yeah.
X has come along, and this is why you're seeing, politicians in the UK, you saw in Australia, politicians as well, launching on Elon Musk because A, he can't be controlled, B, he's unpredictable, and C, he has the platform that will destroy their narratives.
Yeah, he's very powerful. I noticed that Elon is also at war with Hamza Yousaf, Scotland's former First Minister, and they're calling each other racists, which is only true in Yousaf's case. Elon dared him to sue him because he feels Discovery will take care of the fact that Hamza's private conversations are even far more racist than his public ones. He's also at war with Keir Starmer, since Starmer seems to think that Elon incites racial hatred by allowing free speech on X, and it's forcing Starmer to tread with caution. Imagine Musk, because of his green car Tesla Focus and all that, used to be their pin-up boy. Now he's become their greatest enemy. Interesting times, huh?
Well, that's the thing that I'm struggling with. It used to be the left wing that were banging on about human rights. It used to be the left wing that defended free speech. It used to be the left wing that opposed, fascist censorship or rules around that. And yet now it's flipped the other way, where you're actually this is the joke of it. Conservatives are inherently want to control things because they're conservative, and if you let freedom reign, you get chaos, which isn't conservative, right? So it kind of makes sense that they want to control things. But now you've got conservatives that are actually, hardcore freedom people who are about freedom of speech, and it's the left that want to control, shut down, censor, and outright ban people. In the case of Trudeau, demonetizing people, debanking them.
Yeah, disgusting.
Appalling tactics that have almost exclusively been from the left side of politics.
Yeah, I mean, from my observation, the left gave up on all principles, a long time ago, and it has been the conservative element in all our Western nations that have actually tried to rescue a lot of these principles. What did you think, Cam, about Trump offering Elon to be a government efficiency commissioner in his administration to cut the cost and size of federal government.
Well, he can just use Twitter. I mean, I think Trump praised him as being the biggest cutter. I think he called him, didn't he? The biggest cutter. Because when he took over Twitter and renamed it X, he sacked 2/3 of the staff.
Yep.
And you can remember all of the wittering classes in the media were going, oh, no, X will fall over. Oh, no, X will collapse.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it won't work anymore. Well, it's better than ever. I mean, and yes, they had some problems yesterday, but they weren't of X's own making. There was some...
I can't believe what everybody's focus on the problems. Like they got sorted within an hour and the interview went ahead, and sure, Trump lisped a bit because the mic was funny, but the speculation over that's been done by the left on it being a train wreck of an interview is ridiculous.
It was a deliberate attack on X, and they blame, Donald Trump for it. It's insane. But I just looked up the stats. 237 million people have seen the tweet or interacted with the tweet about that interview. And then a second post, which is a replay, has 8.5 million people. I mean, that's incredible reach.
Incredible reach.
Not just the United States and around the world, where people are actually starting to discover for the first time who this real person is, rather than media-constructed demonization of a man who's nothing other than a patriot.
It's amazing to us, isn't it? Because we followed the presidency. We know all Trump's quirks and we know the things he did that were great. And I'm highly aware of Trump's flaws or the mistakes he made, but I don't talk about them publicly. And I know people get a bit annoyed with me because I don't. But my logic is that because he had the whole world media doing nothing but focus on any mistake he made, I'm not adding my voice to that chorus.
That's the same for me. It's like when I was in Israel.
I'll talk about them privately with my friends or, it's different, but I'm not going to slag the guy off publicly.
Yeah, no, there's some character flaws with Trump, as there is with anybody. Nobody's perfect. But those are, if you and I are talking about it, on the radio, we're looking at the political implications, and the political implications of this. Doesn't matter how much shade the Democrats throw at him, it's already locked in. People know what Trump is like, and they've taken that into account. And so now we're actually dealing with the things that he can do or has done. And if you compare those with what Kamala Harris has done or will do, it's night and day.
Trump makes those people look like an absolute saint. No, sorry, he makes himself look like a saint in comparison to those terrible people. And compared to them, he is one. But no politician, of course, is going to be perfect. We don't expect Jesus to be elected into office, do we? We expect a human being, and they're going to come with excellent points and some not so excellent ones. But all I see is the good stuff now because America really needs him.
Yeah.
And also that interview, or a discussion as it was yesterday, was amazing. And it gave me a bit of hope because, the one thing we can bank on is that the Dems are going to try and steal another election. They're gaslighting the polls all the time to make Kamala look amazing. And it's going to be very hard to do this with X functioning as it does in such a powerful way. It is fast becoming the major tool of the resistance. And that's wonderful.
Yeah, Elon Musk is cleverer than any media commentator would who criticizes him. He could collect all of their intellects up, add them all together, and they still wouldn't beat his brain. And people mistake his very autistic way of talking, his stuttering way of discussing things for stupidity. And he must just sit there laughing, thinking, they think I'm stupid. Watch what I do next.
Yeah, I mean, Elon is a brilliant man. I mean, I'm always a little bit wary of anybody that's into AI as much as he has, but I mean, his thinking on it is that we're going into AI whether you like it or not. You're going to need ethical people in it also, and that's actually quite true.
That was a fantastic Olivia's view, and we'll talk again in 2 weeks, Olivia.
Cheers, Cam. Talk soon. Bye.
Right now, free speech is under heavy attack in New Zealand and overseas, with governments constantly devising new ways to enforce censorship. To make sure you never miss the critical news and breaking stories you rely on, join the RCR mailing list today. Get connected now at realitycheck.radio/email.
Now it's time for Cam's Buddies. This week we'll find out what they think about how police appear to be monitoring hate speech and tipping up at people's houses asking about mean tweets. My producer has them all lined up and ready to go. Let's go now to Cam's Buddies. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Paul. Good to have you back.
Thanks, Cam. Good to be back. Just 1 second. There. How are you this day?
I'm fantastic. And yourself?
Yeah, pretty good, mate. Pretty good. All is well. And a lovely sunny day.
Yeah, beautiful. Now, you might have seen some stuff going on in the UK with people that are being arrested for daring to tell the truth on things like Twitter or X, Facebook, and the police are coming around and knocking on their doors and arresting them for putting mean comments out on social media. The Free Speech Union in New Zealand has also highlighted that the New Zealand police seem to have a hate speech policy in place with training for police officers to do, well, exactly the same thing. And earlier today on the show, I spoke to a guy that had been doorstepped by the police at dinner time for precisely this reason. I'm interested to know what your thoughts are on the police policing mean tweets.
Well, I'm really interested in where this stems from, because you talk to the average police officer and they're just normal blokes that kid round, and even some of them like a bit of a blue, and hence they join the police so that it's sanctioned. When people get out of hand, they can, they have a bit of fun. They're just normal Kiwi blokes. They're not thinking, I've got an idea, I've had hurty feelings. They don't think about that. They just think it's all a bit of fun, a bit of a laugh. Now, when you've got people that someone's driving an agenda that says, oh, if I get my feelings hurt, then something's happened and we all have to whatever. So you can't say that this bloke who was Barry is now Mary, or you can't point out the obvious that when a male XY chromosome bashes a female in the head, and we call it boxing, and he's really a she. And like the Olympics, I thought were disgraceful with the boxing, and now we're getting this coming into New Zealand. Who's driving this rubbish agenda? Because that's not the New Zealand way. That's not how we think. So if you've got hurty feelings, the old sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. We all grew up with that. And now we're getting all this stupidity that, you've said something to offend the Muslim faith, or you've said something about fat people, or you've said something about black people, or you've said something about thick people. And in the end, you just think, well, what can you say? And I've always just said how I see things. And many people thank me for my candour, but now it's looking like I'm going to be arrested. Well, if we can't get the New Zealand government, Luxon and Peters and that sort of thing, to say this is not how we act, then we will be way worse off for it.
It's almost like people have forgotten sticks and stones. I had that drummed into me. I can remember my brother coming home from school and saying somebody said something mean to him, and, Mum, you need to do something about it. And she said, don't worry about it, he's a dick. And it's like people have forgotten that these are just words. And they've got this sort of victim mentality. And worse than that, there seems to be a system in place that can be used to bully people for saying mean things by reporting them to the police or having them doorstepped to have a chat with them about a mean tweet. Now, in our Bill of Rights, you're allowed to impart any opinion, any knowledge, and you've got a right to receive that knowledge that you wish to receive without anybody impinging it. And in my world, offence can only be taken, not given. And so if someone gets offended, that's a problem, not a me problem.
Yeah, well, that's a choice, isn't it? Like, I used to be slightly built, and different members of our family would call me Skell, short for skeleton, and Tin, short for, skinny as a tin man, and Rake, and all this sort of thing. And in fact, one of my nicknames was Pop for pop rivet because I was so thin. I'm 130 kilos now, so I dream about having such insults. But at the time, all these sort of hurt a bit, I thought, and I'm thinking, actually, the people that are saying it to me are overweight. They wish they were like me. And I took myself in hand and thought, don't be such a girl. You can, if someone sees something that is likely to give you hurty feelings, harden up. We don't need stupidity. And I don't care. You can say anything you like to me. I mean, you can call me. What does it say? You can call me anything you like, just don't call me late for a meal.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I always say to people, I get people all the time on Twitter calling me fatso or whatever, thinking it's an insult. And I just usually reply to them, well, you need a big hammer to drive a long nail, and I never hear back from them.
Oh, I do like that as a saying, to be fair. And like when you look at who these people are that are taking you to court, it's starting at, I see that Trudeau doesn't like people criticising him. I see Jordan Peterson, because he wasn't woke enough, has now had the Supreme Court of Canada telling me he has to go for DEI training. Who's the fool that's going to take on that and train him? And he said to a few people, I'm not threatening you, but this is a game you really don't want to play. Don't take the job of trying to train me, because it will be televised and you'll look like a prat. And even saying that, I imagine he's up for some trouble. But he's saying, yep, if you want to take my ability to practice psychology away, then because he hasn't... The people that complained about him have never been a client. They've never been near him. They have hurt feelings on someone else's behalf. And I think that's where all these hurty feelings go. If you say to me, did I hurt your feelings? The answer is no. But you might have hurt someone's feelings, overheard this, so I'm complaining on behalf of a straw man. Now, when you talk to people that are just overweight, for example,
yeah,
they've actually learned to cope with insults about being overweight so that it hardly affects them. Now, they may, one way of coping, maybe just don't be around those people.
Yep.
Another way of coping is, like you say, come up with something like, probably find this hard to believe, but people have often criticised me for my high testosterone levels, which has caused me to be bald. And so they have bald jokes about me. Well, I think some of them are bloody funny. I think that, you know, I say to people, you know, I've decided to paint rabbits on my head. Why is that? Well, from a distance, they might look like hares. and so look, most people aren't out to be hurtful. They're just saying, I don't like myself today, so I'm going to insult you and make you feel worse about you. Well, it's hardly let's have the police out on the strength of that. I mean, it defies belief. If they've got things like in some of the Islamic countries, they're thinking of lowering the age of consent to get married to 9, wouldn't that be something that would be more interesting for them to go after than whether or not I said something about a minority group that they didn't care about, but someone's been offended on behalf of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I think it comes down to a couple of things. It comes down to the fact that we've become humorless. And, you know, if you think to our Monday lunches with the boys, it is wall-to-wall sledging, right? You come late, you get sledged. You go early, you get sledged. You take a phone call in the lunch, you get sledged. You say something stupid, you just get torn apart. And you either cope or you don't come. But those who cope have a great time. And we've lost that. And the second thing is we've lost the ability, or people seem afraid to challenge people on their delusions. And, you know, one of the best ones I ever saw was when Ben Shapiro was on a show with a transgender person and kept calling him, and he got threatened to, you know, he's going to get a hiding from this person. And he said, well, your feelings don't outweigh my facts. And that's the reality of the situation. There's a whole lot of lunatic beliefs out there, and for some reason we're not allowed to point at them and laugh uproariously and say, you're deluded, man. You know, when you actually say to someone, you're actually deluded. Now they get offended and they're going to sick the police on you. Grow up.
Well, in Britain, in times gone by, if you be polite to somebody, you're not really a good mate. Unless you're sledging them a bit from time to time, that's the means show their love by teasing one another. Because if I don't know you well enough to tease, then I'll be polite to you, but you're probably insufferable. But if I'm teasing you, it's because this is how men interact. Now, my wife often says to me, "Oh, hanging out with you guys is brutal," when I hear some of the conversations that may or may not have gone down. And when she hangs out with her girlfriends, they're all very nice to one another. But in reality, when a woman stabs you in the back, it's way worse than when the man's teasing you, you know? Like, women have got a degree of nastiness, whereas men have got a degree of openness. Yeah. And, like, women go for character assassination, men bash you in the face. And hence, we can be friends later because we happen to get that thing sorted. And so I just look at them thinking, some of this stuff, when the governments go crazy, then who knows what's the right thing to say? If you ask them, even any of our politicians now, what is a woman? They all could have told you 20 years ago what a woman is. If you ask them now, it's a trick question. Oh, you're trying to make this, you're trying to, you know, they can't even tell you what a woman is. And then they're saying, but we're saying this is definitely a woman. Well, it's a man, and it's at a boxing tournament. Yeah. And so all these things, I just look at them thinking, it's crazy stuff. And when the police start getting involved, when you're weaponising the power of the state against the citizens by saying you've had hurty language and I'm feeling all hurty and whatever, I just think, get a life.
Well, all I think of is dry your eyes. You know, here's a box of tissues. What's the solution to this? Just a quick one before you go, Paul. What do you think the solution is? Is this a case of have a cup of cement or something similar?
Well, absolutely. You take a Viagra and hard enough of it. But the point that I'm making here is the police are not thinking, I've got an idea, let's go and terrorise the citizenry. Someone in a government department has come up with this as a good idea, so let's do this. And they've been listening to something stupid like the WHO or it's all designed to create anarchy amongst the citizenry so that then they can control us more.
So there's a problem. That's the trouble with the police too, is that, you know, when you're holding a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yes, exactly.
And the police have only a few tools in their kit. It starts off in having a chat, then it starts with detaining you, and then it carries on up the escalation path and may or may not involve tasers and all sorts of other things, all because somebody perceived something to be hurty. And that's a them problem, not a you problem.
Yes, but also we need to be schooled that when the police come down to the door, the questions are you going to arrest me? Are you charging me? Shut the door. It used to be they were your friend. You could ask them on the way home and all sorts of things. Now, any interaction you have with them, in my view, is best. Like, if they come to your place, they're not coming because they want to go fishing. They're coming because they believe that you've done something wrong. So the questions to get out quickly are, am I under arrest? Do I need counsel? Are you going to charge me with anything? Okay, goodbye, shut the door.
Yep. Am I being detained? Am I under arrest? Am I being charged? Simple stuff. Just say that. If the answer is negative to all of those, it's exactly what you do. You shut the door and don't answer it again. I mean, I've done that to police at my house, and I'm sure you've done it too. I mean, I used to be a G-man, you know. I used to think the police could do no wrong. Well, that ended quite some time ago for me.
Yes. Well, any time I've gone to the police with someone who's committed a crime against either me or my property, it's not long before I become the defendant. That's how they treat me. And I'm thinking, right, so I now have changed my opinion of them. We have to have them. We need law and order. But in the end, sometimes they are looking for the easy targets. And let me tell you what an easy target looks like. White middle-aged male.
Yeah. White middle-aged male who goes to church, even better.
Yep.
All right, Paul, thanks for your views on that. We'll talk again next week.
Well, we'll take care. Bye for now.
Thank you. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Miles. Good to have you back.
How are you today, Cam?
I'm fantastic, as always, but you know the rules on that.
Excellent. Pleased to hear that.
Hey,
well, you might not be so fantastic if you made some naughty comments on social media.
Oh, that's right. I mean, you would have heard earlier talking to Gareth about the police turning up and threatening him with removal of his firearms if he wasn't a fit and proper person because he said some mean tweets on Twitter. And we've seen this in the United Kingdom, you know, grannies and people, you know, other pensioners being arrested for things on social media. And it seems it's creeping its way into New Zealand society. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm going to throw a brickbat at the police. What the hell are they thinking? They are doing something that's ultra vires. It's above the law. Where is this coming from? And if it's coming from Costa, the commissioner, that has got to stop. And that's up to Mitchell, the minister, to put his foot down. Now, I'm really sorry, but shouldn't the police be spending their time and efforts on crimes that have real victims, crimes of violence, crimes of theft? Shouldn't they be spending their time on that? And yet they're busy snooping, chasing down someone who might or might not have offended someone. Well, diddums, I say to that. Get the police back on track, Minister Mitchell.
Well, in the interaction that Gareth had with the police, this police constable said to him, you know, you understand your responsibilities as a firearms license holder, as a fit and proper person, and your obligations as a fit and proper person. And he wisely said, yes, but so what? Being a firearms license owner myself and somebody who's been confronted by the police, none of what that constable said is actually in the law. There's no definition of a fit and proper person. There's no definition even of a collector in the Arms Act. And yet she's talking about obligations which also aren't in the Arms Act or any other act for that matter. And they're like making it up. And at the same time, they're standing there with their tasers, Glocks on their hip, ready to go. Or
so
what he did
they're
on
making
Twitter.
it up, and they're making it up just for a few comments on Twitter. I mean, what the hell has happened to the police? We are seeing in this incident a really concrete example of the two-tier policing that has happened in the UK, and it hasn't ended well in the UK, and it's not going to end well here. The police need to pull their heads out of stuff that doesn't concern them, and let's be quite honest, free speech is free speech, and if you say something that is inciting a criminal act or something else, then there's room to act, for the police to act. But if you would just say something that upsets someone, well, grow up. Diddums to you. And let's have a robust debate. And the police should not be involved in this. Where is the law? There is no hate speech law in New Zealand. So what is going on in the police?
There's no hate speech law. There's no fit and proper person obligations in any law. And yet the police, what we're seeing here is the police making stuff up that isn't in the law in order to entrap somebody. They're hoping.
No, they're threatening someone. They're actually threatening someone. So the police are threatening someone with something that's totally made up for something that there is no law against doing. It's just beginning to sound like a clown show.
Well, but I think that they're doing it on purpose because firearms owners don't want to lose their guns. And so when you get two police officers turn up and start talking about you losing your guns, all of a sudden your sphincter starts twitching a little bit and you start minding your people.
I think that's true. And you have to ask yourself, who was the sergeant that was involved with those police officers? Because I tell you what, there needs to be some serious butt kicking. The two officers that turned up should have known better. The sergeant that deployed them should have known better. There needs to be some serious butt kicking done in the police. And if the butt kicking goes all the way to Cuddles Costa, the commissioner, well, so be it. He needs to actually get things in hand and say to the police, hey, guys, we're going to concentrate on the basics here. We're going to actually concentrate on going after criminals. You know, those people who wear the Beagle Boys black masks and run around robbing banks and committing violent acts. You know those people? Okay, they're a little bit more difficult to chase after than the law-abiding firearms owners, but that's the police's job, to chase criminals.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Is the criminals actually are easy to identify. They're usually wearing colours or a patch, or are lurking around where they shouldn't have been in the wee small hours. It's kind of easy.
Yeah, but the problem is the police are frightened. They don't want to go near them because they might get beaten up. Well, you know, grow a pair, do your job. For heaven's sake, stop assaulting and intimidating and threatening law-abiding citizens. What's going on?
No, and that's the thing, is firearms owners are law-abiding citizens. We actually are fit and proper persons because we've got a firearms license. Now, sure, there's a few out there, so that's fine, but don't go and shake down someone because of some mean tweets. I mean, that's pathetic. But that's what's happening, and that's the slippery slope that we're heading down, because there aren't people like you or me or in this case Gareth who are prepared to say to the police, no, go away, leave. And you're perfect. If they're not charging you, if they're not detaining you, if they're not arresting you, you are fully within your rights to say to them, no, you're not coming into my house. You don't have a warrant. You can leave. And if
it makes my blood boil.
Oh, it does. It makes my blood boil too, because I know how they do this. I've had it done to me. You've had it done to you. This is what they do. They ring up and they say, we've got a firearm on your license and it's serial number such and such. And you go, no, I don't. They go, yes, you do. And it's this type of firearm. You go, well, that's a serial number for a Ruger. But then they argue with you. And then the next minute you're getting a notice from them saying you need to correct something. Or they take all your guns, they lose the court case, they hand them all back and they send you a letter giving you a notification not to do it again. But you never did anything in the first place.
Correct. And you see, this is where policing has gone wrong in New Zealand. Under the Ardern socialist regime, the police were just let off the leash. They decided that they were above the law. They could make up the rules. Actually, the police have to follow the law, and they have to do a darn sight better job at following the law than you or I might do, because actually that's their job. But the reality is the New Zealand police are a mess, and they are just so it's infuriating. They're just going about their business, threatening and intimidating law-abiding citizens and seemingly ignoring the criminals. It's just infuriating.
Yeah, it seems that you can get in more trouble for a mean tweet than you can in glassing somebody at a pub.
Or a couple of speeding tickets. My gosh, don't mention the speeding tickets. That's another big red button on my back. Don't even start me on that. The police are just out of control.
They certainly are. All right, Miles, thanks for your input on that. The listeners will be in no uncertain knowledge that you and I, although formerly G-men, are no longer fans of the constabulary.
Correct. You have a good day, Cam. We'll catch you later.
Thanks, Miles. Welcome to Cam's Buddies, Linley.
Hello, Cam. How's things?
I remembered your name.
Oh, well, we're equal there, aren't we?
We are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you been following the news of the stuff that's happening in the UK with all these protests and how some people have been, putting things on Twitter or X or Facebook and have had the constables coming up and knocking on the door and saying, well, we're arresting you because that's hate speech. And now we've got a case on earlier on the show had somebody on the phone who had exactly the same sort of thing happen here in New Zealand. That the two police turned up at 6:30 knocked on his door while he was feeding the 5 kids that he's got and wanted to have a wee chat about what he's been putting on X. Do you think the police should be policing comments on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, TikTok, whatever they are? You probably don't use too many of those, but do you think the police should be bothering with that, or do you think they should actually go and catch some criminals?
Well, definitely they shouldn't be doing it, but I can see that they will be doing it. And the trust in the police is absolutely rock bottom for a very good reason. In my time, I've gone from the local cop who was trusted and lived in the area and knew everybody, to a pair of cops on the beat who we still trusted and look forward to seeing. And now there's no cops in sight. But they're evidently there, and they will definitely in future be busy looking online for crimes, which is a pretty easy thing to do, isn't it?
Well, they're not going to get fit chasing social media warriors, are they?
No, they're not. But I can see that it's going to happen. And I think that the tone of trust in the police force actually began its slide. This is a pretty biased comment, but when traffic cops joined the force, I can recall when that happened, we were all quite scared of traffic cops for one very good reason, which relates to this. They could pull you over for suspicion of an irregularity, and they often did.
Yeah.
Don't know if you remember those times, but they did. They had a different coloured car, so, you knew who you were dealing with. And if they pulled you over, you sort of froze with fear, and they could look all around your vehicle and do whatever they liked. So when they joined the police force, I think they took that little bit of mistrust with them. Doesn't augur well for the future of the police force, because in more recent times they've lost so much trust anyway with all their ideology and protecting people who are actually the criminals in the scene. So I don't think it's a very good future for us with the police. But I don't know if you've looked at that Royal Commission of Inquiry into the mosque attack, have you?
I have.
Well, it has recommendations in there that show a definite interest in training the police in hate speech, both on and offline.
That's right.
This is in our backyard.
Yep, that's what the Free Speech Union has been fighting against, and that's why I had on this show this week 2 people to talk about how that impacts this policy that the police have rolled out to monitor social media because of this Royal Commission of Inquiry. But it's like they've ignored the other recommendations in the Commission of Inquiry, the one that scolded the police for actually failing in the vetting processes in the first place. It's like, no, we social media is where it's all at. We need to go and beat up these grannies and pensioners that have got X accounts and Facebook. That's far more important than, stopping ram raids or, stopping violence in the streets. No, we're going to go around and we're going to shake people down in the evening when they're, sitting in front of their TV or enjoying some relaxation. That's when we'll go and knock on the door, all for something that's actually not in the law. There is no law.
Well, it will be.
Well,
it will. It will be.
It won't be if we people like you and I stand up and say, no, we're not prepared for you to do this. We don't accept that this is appropriate. I mean, we know that the Labour Party and the Greens were, all for it. We had a change of government that said, no, we're going to cancel those hate speech laws. But you're right, like rust, it never sleeps. These woke people with their ideology, they're going to try again. And so we have to make sure that people are equipped with the right responses to tell people, politicians especially, we don't want you to do this, and if you do that, you're going to lose your job.
Yeah, well, the hardest thing if we say us, because we're obviously anti this, you and I, the hardest thing to get through is the media, because they just will not print or record the side of the argument that we're talking about. They'll only print or the other side of the argument which is how this will help everybody and how lovely it is for minority groups, etc., etc., etc. And in the course of this, what actually is hate speech? If you read the recommendations, it's just about anything that insults anyone.
Yeah, I mean, basically, someone can have hurty feelings. That's considered to be hate speech. You call someone fatso or fatty. And now all of a sudden you have the police feeling your collar because some, heifer has got upset that you've insulted their weight when the evidence is there for us.
That's absolutely right. And this ideology thing goes far and wide. It covers everything. It covers all the minority groups, genders, race, sex, as you say, weight, just absolutely anything that somebody might take offence to. So this is actually very worrying.
So what do we do to stop?
They have said in that report, which worries me. I think I'm quite good at spotting these tiny little drops of information, because they say there is value in limiting the escalation from hate speech to hate crime. That's based on a review which was actually done in London that decided that online hate can begin on social media and migrate into the physical world. Well, we actually know that, and we saw it with the mosque attack. And who picked that up anyway? How did that happen? Because that fellow had heaps of hate stuff online, and nobody seemed to notice it or anything. The police were not very good in the incident itself, and yet they've used that to develop this idea that the police should be running around sticking their noses into our social media. And then further on they say that since 2019 the police have been recording hate crime, and it recommends training in effectiveness of systems, and it says that hate crime recording has been inconsistent so far due to limited training. So here they are training in online hate speech.
Yep.
And no, there are no laws, but you can see what they're looking at. They're looking at the future, and they're pretty confident that this is going to come through, aren't they?
It's just another way to have them control the masses. Be careful what you say. You might end up in the back of a paddy wagon or handcuffed in the back of a police vehicle. For the high crime of saying something hurty to somebody.
And I think it actually goes as far as not only saying something hurty, but agreeing with somebody else who's saying something hurty.
Yeah, clicking like or giving it a thumbs up or a heart symbol or something similar. That's the pernicious way that it goes. And, of course, you end up with people being silenced when they've actually done nothing wrong other than offend some, usually an anonymous person who is taking great umbrage at something that somebody said, like that's important. My view is that if you don't like what people are saying on social media, don't go.
No, well, of course, they haven't learnt to be resilient, these people. I had hoped that that would be the new big industry, teaching resilience, but it doesn't seem to have happened because I think it creates huge groups of victims, and that suits everybody, really. I don't think that the world likes people to be resilient these days. But I think the police are going to go after the gun owners under the guise of online hate speech. That seems to be
exactly
what's likely to happen.
That's exactly what they're doing. I'm waiting to knock on the door myself because I might hurt somebody's feelings. But they know that if they do knock on my door, that they're going to get famous, and they don't really like that, so they kind of don't bother me. But there's plenty of other people out there that they can go and intimidate and will intimidate because, well, they're bullies, really.
I know, and they're not as brave as they used to be. And And the thing is, they can't go after unregistered gun owners, who's the ones that they should go after, because they don't know who they are.
No, but it's all the fault of the licensed gun owners, apparently, according to the police union. It's all our fault. Even though the statistics and the maths don't support them on that, that's what they say anyway. And, of course, the media, the mainstream media dutifully reports that as though it's a fact. But that's exactly what they are doing. They're going up to firearms owners saying, we've seen you've said something mean on X or Facebook, and somebody's upset about that. And by the way, do you realise if you do that you could lose your firearms licence, despite the fact that there's no law that would allow them to do that. This is a made-up thing that the police are doing, and it's illegal, but that's what they're doing. And we've got video of it happening right here in New Zealand.
I know, it's terrible. And of course, it's pretty hard to get the specific data on, what the gun-related incidents actually are, so you can compare year by year. But certainly from how it seems to me, I have never seen or heard of so many shootings and gun-related incidents since the guns were confiscated and subsequently licensed after the mosque attack. Seems to be, a regular weekly event for some sort of shooting. But as I said, those incidents, I'd be very interested to see statistics of how many of those were by registered gun owners or licensed.
I can tell you, none. None.
So there you go. That proves the point.
These people are criminals, right? They don't have firearms licenses. They have illegal firearms, and the register and changes to the gun laws won't affect them because they're criminals. So it's not going to happen. And so the gun laws and any changes that the police and everybody else wants to foist on people are only going to affect law-abiding citizens and not the criminals. And at the same time, they're policing the firearms owners using hate speech or social media when the problem is actually not with those people. The problem is out there with ratbags that are violent and criminals, but they don't seem to want to deal with those.
No, they want control, as you said before. They want control of the masses. They're not worried about the criminals. And I think, like a lot of things, it's a thin end of the wedge. And I also think Orwell's 1984, here we come, because this is about mass control for sure.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that politicians around the world during COVID picked up 1984 and used it as a manual rather than a warning.
Well, you'd have to think that would be dead right. You would just have to. It's just going down the same pathway, which is pretty scary for the likes of us. But yes, we do have to stand up. But the thing is how you get the message through the media, because they're really the tool for whoever runs the show.
Yeah. The only solution is to destroy the media and to support media like Reality Check Radio, like shows like The Crunch and everybody else who works for Reality Check Radio, because we're not afraid to have these discussions. We're not going to get upset because somebody disagrees with us or anything like that. And it's so important to support us and not them, basically.
Well, it is. It's going to grow fairly slow, or slower than I would like. I'd like it, to be all over in one day. But slowly, Reality Check Radio is increasing its reach.
Yep.
Every time they have a politician on from the other side, although that's not very pleasant to endure, it does mean that at least some of their friends and family will listen to the interview subsequently. So, that just brings a few more in, I think. I think they're very clever, those three girls at the top.
Yeah, they're pretty clever. We've got some clever people working for us. Anyway, that's all we've got time for today, Lindley. So thank you so much for your input, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Cam. Take care.
Bye. Welcome to Cam's Buddies. Jimmy, good to have you back.
G'day, Cameron. How are you this week?
I'm fantastic, as usual. What about yourself?
I'm okay, just bearing up under the strain of a tax-heavy economy. What have you got for me this week anyway, Cam?
You've probably seen the protests in the UK, and then as a result of those protests, people who had tweeted about it or shared a tweet on X about Tommy Robertson or putting their own opinion out there, getting the police to come around and arrest them. And then on today's show earlier on, we had Gareth talking about him getting doorstepped by the police for the similar sort of thing. He wasn't arrested at this stage, but 2 constables came around with tasers and, wanted to have a wee chat with him. They didn't want to detain him or arrest him, and so he shut the door and told them to go away. But we've got this situation where we seem to have the police now. The Free Speech Union, for example, has also found out that the police have this training scheme to teach their people about hate speech, how to recognize it and how to go and deal with it. So I think we're heading down the same path as the UK here, and I'm not sure we want to have that. But I'm interested in your views on that.
I think it's horrifying, to be honest. I think that, free speech obviously carries responsibilities of no hate speech or inciting violence, but just spewing out rubbish on X or Twitter is really pretty harmless. And yet to have the police showing up over it is insane. How do they even find the person?
Well, that raises a whole lot of new questions, like how did they find out that an anonymous Twitter account was his? Did they breach his privacy?
Yeah, no, I saw the case you're talking about. I know what you're talking about. And that's,
yeah.
They threatened with his firearms license, so they looked up, they knew he had firearms. Obviously, They can look that up, but it's really premeditated. And I've seen that guy's tweets. I just don't think he's more just full of bluster. There's no real,
a few goes at me, calling things out, which he's entitled to do. Everyone has an opinion. They're kind of like...
You need a few people to have a go at you, mate, to bring you down a peg or two.
Yeah, and what? But to get visited by the police and then for them to suggest that he's not meeting his obligations as a fit and proper person and could lose his firearms and his license, I think is a step way too far, mainly because they've got no legal avenue to do that.
Yeah, well, that's where it gets all murky, right? Because who makes the rules on what is good and proper to say? We know who will end up making the rules if it happens. The woke politicians. Because the left say a lot of awful stuff as well. I've seen replies to David Seymour's death threats and all sorts of stuff. They don't get visited.
Well, it's like people...
you should see the hate that Shane Jones gets. Holy crap.
I get people all the time sledge me and say, oh, shut up, fatso, or, why are you sitting there, you fat, lump of lard? And they're saying all this technically can all be, hate speech, but I just either don't reply to them or I give them a reply something like, you need a big hammer to drive a long nail, and it kind of shuts them up.
Yeah, well, the whole problem is who makes the rules. That's where the problem is. That's why free speech has to be absolute, because as soon as you try and pigeonhole it into what's okay and what's not, it's always going to come from some sort of angle, and both sides don't want the other side to make the rules, right?
Yeah, sure, you can't incite violence. You can't say to someone, why don't you go and get a knife and stab yourself or hang yourself? You can't say anything like that. That is against the law. It's not in the law.
Yeah, and I agree with that. You shouldn't have to do that. It's fine.
No, that's right. You can't incite violence. There is a law for that, and that's what the police should be enforcing, not whether somebody's offended about something or their nose is out of joint because, of a snarky comment on social media. It's just ridiculous.
I know. Did you see on Tuesday that Elon Musk interviewed Trump on Spaces, and the EU commissioner threatened Elon with trying to limit what they say to stop
he didn't want
Trump going to.
Yeah, he didn't want to have the EU commissioner didn't want to have Trump on. He's trying to tell a private company based in the United States who he can have, and who he can platform. Yeah, this is just outrageous. But it didn't work because apparently about 50 million people tuned into it and watched it.
Yeah, it's massive. And now the mainstream media are absolutely dissing it. I've seen just saying it was a horror show, but massive. Like, the disconnect from the media and reality is just growing chasm by chasm. Did you see this week that the Herald's not going to publish any more front page advertising from the...
Yeah, all because a couple of uppity, stroppy, Maori agitators threatened them, basically. People like Matthew Tukaki, we all know his CV is, as honest as a Herald article, right? But it was him and the Maori Party basically stamping their feet, doing a war dance, and the Herald's now caved and said, oh, no, we're not going to have any advertisements from people that other people might be upset about. Well, the Herald doesn't deserve to be in business any longer.
Well, what's wrong with their, sorry, who's the crowd? I forgot the name.
Hobson's Pledge.
Yeah, what's wrong with Hobson's Pledge money? I read the original ad. There was no swear words. It was nothing offensive. It just stated stuff that obviously a lot of people disagree with, but it wasn't. Why don't they place a bigger ad that counters it? What's this silencing in this country? It's insane.
That's exactly,
the Herald needs the money.
Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they do a front page ad countering it? That's why we have a debate.
Yeah.
But
some journalists counter the ad and the editorial. Like, this is, but now it's silenced, and so the Hobson's Pledge money is going to go elsewhere. They won't stop, and then it's going to polarise more. They should have a counterbalance in the paper, and I think that the deplatforming is just horrendous, and that's why we need to fight for free speech, because we know which side wants to control it.
Well, the funny thing is, it used to be the left that was all in favour of free speech. It used to be the left that protected human rights. And, now it's the left wing that wants to silence, blacklist, deplatform, censor. We need to say no to these censorious...
Well, we've discussed this in the past. The left and right spectrum isn't a line. It's more of a horseshoe. The further left you go, the more fascist and right-wing you become. That's what's happened. It's just screwed around. It's very bizarre. The last 5 years has been so strange.
It's totally bizarre. But that's the world we live in, where people can say, blokes can say, I want to be called Shirley now, and I'm a woman. And we all know that it's stupid. But if you say, sorry, mate, we're not going to entertain your delusion, now you're some sort of, phobe. They give you some sort of nickname that says that you can't have an opinion, that someone who holds those beliefs is ridiculous or whatever. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a whole lot of people out there who are trans before all of this became a fad that just got on with their lives. I used to have a customer who advertised with me, who was a trans person. I just dealt with her respectfully. We didn't need to have it shoved down our throats. But now it's shoved down our throats. You're getting a reaction. And for some reason, we're not allowed to have a reaction. We're being implored to entertain people's delusions.
Yep, and it always comes with a big slice of socialism, mate. Everything.
Well, that's how they keep everybody splintered and fighting against each other.
Yeah, it's when does the Empress close? When does the kid shout the Empress got no clothes and it all just falls away and everyone just returns back to 2010 when things are, not so bizarre?
Well, I think it was kind of around then. There was ridiculous stuff going on back then.
Well, like I said, it's always been like your grandfather thought stuff was ridiculous in 1967, mate.
Yeah, but when they did think it was ridiculous, they said it, and no one got upset. They went, that's just Bob, having his opinion. And it's like we're not allowed to have opinions, or there's this committee that approves the opinions. But even if you go along with the approved opinion, there'll be another committee saying, well, no, we've revised that now, and now you're in trouble because even though we revised it and we didn't notify you of that, it still stands. And so then you get hung for that.
Yeah, you'll be first at the witch's stake, Slater.
Probably, but they'll have to come through me and my firearms first, so,
Oh, well, Thanks, Cam.
Thanks for your call, Jimmy, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
It's always interesting to see what the person on the street thinks, and today was no different. We should be concerned at recent developments in the UK and here. My baddies know it, you know it, but it seems the only people who don't know it or don't want to know it are the police and woke parliamentarians. Tell us your thoughts on this important topic by emailing inbox@realitycheck.radio or text to 2057.
You're listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.
And now it's time for the whale bag. Some general feedback. I had a message from Steve. Can you explain why Maori wards are an affront to our democracy? Presumably it's because they were never voted on by the people, but instituted by an elite who know best. The wisdom of deregulation of New Zealand's GM laws is a self-evident truth, albeit never voted on by the people, but about to be instituted by an elite who know what's best for us. Did the New Zealand First campaign publicly on GM deregulation? When did it ditch its long-standing policy of supporting the precautionary principle in favour of laissez-faire biotech? I went to a number of Winston's public meetings and not a mention. Was it mentioned in any of his pre-election interviews on RCR? A referendum on such a major issue would be an absolute minimum in a functioning democracy. I had Elwyn Poole on last week. He's an educational specialist, and he was in to discuss the shocking revelations of poor math statistics and some potential solutions. I've got a long email from Janet. She says, I was teaching in a Decile 1 school for many years. I loved it. The children were excited to learn. It was a primary school, and I believe that primary school's most important job is to teach primary skills. Basic facts are crucial, and good old-fashioned rote learning is not to be scoffed at. For 5 minutes every day in my class, children recited tables from 2 times to 12 times together as a whole class. It became as natural as breathing. And once part of the routine, it was driven by the children. They became exuberant to the extent that people out on the street used to tell me they loved hearing that sing-song sound ringing out at the same time every day. It's a happy sound. It's amazing how quickly children internalize basic multiplication facts when this happens. It's not just a Pavlovian response, but learners quickly are able to translate and apply their skills, e.g. mentally adding large numbers by rounding, multiplying, and subtracting or adding. Rote learning is sadly underrated in our present system, but it's a vital part of children's learning. And it only takes a few minutes each day. I'm continually staggered at the lack of confidence many primary teachers have in their own mathematical ability. Rote learning has the advantage of very quickly lifting teachers' own competency along with their pupils, if they're brave enough to teach by rote. Unfortunately, rote learning is not considered smart, creative, or innovative, and sadly too many teachers relegate basic fact teaching into the too hard or too simple basket. I agree with Elwyn's approach. Basic operations and getting a grip on the jargon at an early age are vitally instrumental in building enthusiastic and competent young mathematicians. Anonymous writes and says, as a teacher for many years, I would love the government kicked out of schools much more from both sides of the aisle. Trust teachers to do their job and have fewer strings attached to funding. And there was a Facebook comment from Andrew who said, who created this maths religion? 95% of jobs require only the ability to use a basic calculator, if that. And no, the tedious exercises do not improve logic ability, according to education researcher Brian Kaplan. And my buddies shared their thoughts on the same math statistics in New Zealand schools and our education system. And there's a very lengthy letter an email from Stuart, which I'll now read out. I'm listening to Cam's buddy talk about the education system and its failings, and I feel compelled to write. Now, I need to comment on the education system with 2 children still involved in it, but also to commend you and RCR on the quality of productions you constantly and consistently put out. It is by far New Zealand's greatest media asset, and you all deserve congratulations. RCR fills most of my available listening time because I learn so much here about what I want to know about, and the quality of the interviews is far superior to anything else available in New Zealand. On the topic of education, my 2 children, now years 10 and 11, have had the worst of experiences with secondary education, as they've come through the COVID era where school was closed on and off and on and on. Following that, the teachers decided to go on strike constantly. Then you add all the extra days off that the teachers have for whatever reason. The lack of consistency with attendance is primarily the fault of the education system, the teachers and the bloody unions. What it taught my kids was that school is not important. It's not a high priority for the teachers to teach the kids. The students can be put off at any time. And as parents, we lost a huge amount of respect for the schools, the teachers, and the education system. And that was before we really looked into what they were teaching them, or the failings of the teachers themselves. The teachers teach strategies for maths, not actually how to solve an equation. It's absolutely ridiculous. When all the strikes were going on, it took so much time out of the school term, and teachers didn't have time to stop and go back over all the lessons that they had missed. So they just flew through them and made the kids figure it out for themselves. So now we've got kids who haven't learned whatever lesson was supposed to be done that day or week, have moved on to another thing and are getting further and further behind. We've raised this with the schools, requested extra tuition and gone to all the meetings, but nothing's happened. We support our kids and fought to get them attending school regularly. They don't get told to stay home if they are sniffy. Whereas in our day, we'd go to school. It's just a really difficult situation to be able to have motivated kids who want to attend school and who can attend school when school is consistently available to them. And then there's the whole issue of all the woke and Maorification of the education system. It seems all subjects are taught through the lens of te tiriti, and it's just driving the kids nuts. It's driving parents nuts. Our kids and a large number of their friends are absolutely rebelling against the woke agenda. They're furious about it. They hate what they see and how it's been portrayed. For example, my daughter goes to a Catholic school. They have strict rules around jewellery, hair, makeup, uniform. It's great, unless you're on the alphabet list, and then you can have blue hair and piercings. How's that fair? That's enough of a rant for me now. I feel I should make more attempt to get in touch with the station more regularly, as it really does warrant feedback for its excellence. Again, I commend you all. An anonymous comment says, Cam, your mate thinks Te Reo is a waste of time in our educational environment. Obviously doesn't know the mental benefits from learning more than one language from a young age. He sounds as ignorant as the Labour government has removed Latin, classics and other such subjects and replaced it with sex, gender, race and climate education. Your friend who acknowledges the effects of the breakdown of the family is spot on. And I've got a Facebook message from Zach on this topic. Here's what I just listened to. The first speaker thinks the unions create the curriculum, which is a bit of a head scratcher, and shows that his perspective on education isn't based on fact. Actually, he called them the union, singular, many times, but there are several. And he didn't provide any examples whatsoever to illustrate his point, besides attacking unions for, again, somehow creating the curriculum. He says, I don't want them, the students, to be learning Te Reo, which is going to be useless. Next, in a span of a few minutes, there comes a trans joke, a joke about students identifying as cats, which comes from a hoax that people like Joe Rogan latched onto and spread as misinformation. And a major moment of almost clarity when the host thinks youth get all their information from social media, and that's why they're concerned about climate change. When in fact, the host is in his own echo chamber. The host says it's all just a moral panic about students vaping because at least they aren't smoking cigarettes. And he again repeats that it's a union-controlled system. The speaker recalls how school music competitions built up students' confidence, and then the host says we need to listen to the speaker and not the unions. But it's teachers who have been defending the arts this week after Luxon's comment that music classes are nice to have. and calls the teachers communists for not wanting performance pay. Well, Zach, I hope you enjoy standing up in front of the kids in the classroom this week. Teresa replied to Zach, though, and said, if you don't think that some students are identifying as cats, then it shows you live in your own echo chamber. It's happening, sadly. Do you think teachers should all be paid the same? I don't. And Lau replies as well, I agree, and unions have always been our downfall, imported pommy stirrers, but just like Zach, Cam's buddies are allowed to have an opinion. And that's the whale bag for this week. That's it for the Crunch this week. Did you feel for Gareth? I certainly did. All he's done is some mean tweets, and he gets visited by 2 police officers for a wee chat. Now he's been silenced, censored even, because of it. He's too afraid to give an opinion on social media now. And that's just not acceptable. And you can be sure that we will be pursuing this story hard. Hugh Devereux-Mack is being more forceful as the Police Association and the anti-gun lobby fire up over proposed changes to gun laws. He also wasn't impressed with Gareth's situation. Everyone against these law changes seems to think that only they should have a say, but that's not how democracy works, which just goes to show that they are in actual fact anti-democratic. Olivia hit another one out of the park too, didn't she? Now that's why we have Reality Check Radio. That's why we have these discussions here at The Crunch. It's to get you the in-depth takes that you need. You can keep up with all my shows and indeed all our shows by using the RCR app. You can even use the app to stream live. And a big thanks for the team that puts together this show and makes it all work. It's been a real pleasure having you all back this week, and I'm loving all your feedback and really enjoying talking to so many people, sharing their thoughts on politics, life, and everything in between. So big shout out to all of you, and thank you for listening and having faith in me as we continue to explore this beautiful game of politics. Don't forget, email suggestions or feedback to inbox@realitycheck.radio, and let's make this show the best political show in New Zealand. Stay tuned for a repeat of Rodney Hyde's Real Talk coming up next, followed by a replay of Truth Speaker with Tobias Tahi. Now finally, a song to finish with. It's from the Romantics. It's an old favourite, What I Like About You. All these songs are in the Crunch playlist on Spotify, so go search and find them and continue to enjoy the Crunch and its music. And I'm looking forward to having you join me again next week for the Crunch with Cam Slater.
You've been listening to The Crunch with Cam Slater. Remember, you can check out the replays for today's show on our website at www.realitycheck.radio/replays. Tune in every Thursday at 4 p.m. for more with Cam Slater, right here on RCR, Reality Check Radio.